Hi and welcome. This is my first ever members only, possibly members to public eventually video that I'm going to do, and I appreciate you subscribing and being a member of this channel. That means a lot to me. It allows me to continue doing what I do, which is providing body language analysis and also in a hopefully entertaining manner. So today I'm analyzing the body language of Lori Vallow Daybell, a Mormon lady, Church of the Latter-day Saints, who ended the lives of her children and at least conspired to end the lives of other people. This is an interview she did with Arizona's Family. That's a channel that I'm going to leave the link to in the description box below, so please go check that out. If you would like to see the full video, let's get into it.
You guys good?
Yep.
Cool. Well, it's been an interesting 2.5 weeks.
Has it only been that long? Yeah, it's been feels a little longer, I would say. Yeah, it went fast.
Guilty. Did you expect that?
No.
Not at all.
I mean, obviously I knew that's a possibility. Yeah, so it was a bit of a surprise.
Now we do see a normal blink rate here. With Lori Vallow, I don't want to focus too much on the glabella furrowing, the grief muscles, because with her, this is just naturally part of her face, this wrinkling of the muscles here, and that can make it a little bit difficult to tell when exactly she's being aggressive, if she's surprised, if she's skeptical, things along those lines. At the very least, we know that what we haven't seen in many of the interviews and interrogation videos of Lori Vallow, if you've followed this case, is grief. Downward glabella furrowing in a way that's not natural for her. And in fact, we see the complete opposite. We see a smile. We see those muscles contracted around the orbicularis that show that she is genuinely smiling and not sad about this at all, which is unusual for someone who has lost their children. Even if they feel like this is something that they had to do, in the case of people who have ended the lives of an abuser, even that should come with some amount of grief. Even leaving an abuser comes with some amount of grief that we should be able to see. It isn't happiness, relief, or anything along those lines. Even though we may feel some bit of relief, there is still some grief attached to this person and the memories that you may have with them. As people who are in abusive relationships don't endure that every single day of their life. Usually that is not the pattern of abusers, and there will be happy memories attached to that relationship. In this case, this is her kids, and she expresses no sadness, even though her narrative attached to this is that she had to end their lives because they were possessed. This isn't typical of everyone associated with the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I have been a Mormon before, and that is not what Mormons just in general are taught or believe in. But this is the narrative that Lori herself is attached to this situation and why she had to end the lives of others, and taking those matters in her hands. And in this case, I know I'm not talking about nonverbal cues as much here in this part, but I do want to note that this is someone in control, someone taking matters in their own hands, someone who feels superior to others and believes that she is in charge of doing this sort of thing. Even if she were detached from reality, which we would see someone who doesn't indicate this level of control. If we were seeing someone detached from reality, we would still not see someone feeling that they are superior enough and in control enough that they would feel in charge of ending the lives of others. Now, this is not always the case, but most likely this is what we would see, and not someone who feels superior and in control. That points more to narcissism, and the lack of grief points more to possible antisocial personality disorder.
Actually, what made you surprised that it went that direction?
I mean, I shouldn't be surprised knowing what I know about the judicial system and how it works. So it still was. Just, you were there, so from what happened, I was surprised at that outcome.
And we didn't really see any noticeable reaction from you.
So the several behaviors I want to note here are that we have eye blocking, her closing her eyes for a long time. When she said, "I shouldn't," her keeping out and her aversion to the idea that she shouldn't have been surprised. Again, this brings back this level of control and power to herself, that she should not be surprised with this situation, and that perhaps she even wasn't. Then you see eyebrow raising, eyebrow flashes for a creasing when she wants to emphasize I, you, shouldn't be. Given the process, she puts blame on the process, which perhaps takes guilt and accountability from herself and absolves her of that. And you don't see the chin down in her protecting this vulnerable part of her body because she does not feel guilt and shame around this situation. This is very much something she is prideful of and felt that she should have done all along. She's very confident and brings importance to specific points. Her saying, given what took place, and bringing emphasis and significance to that, but then saying the word surprise in that fades. There's a drop in features. It's not negative tonality, but she goes back to her normal baseline there and not bringing significance to the word surprise in regards to the verdict of her case where she has been found guilty.
Or really anybody else in the courtroom when that verdict was read. When you did hear it, what was your first thought?
So it's not a secret that I had a near-death experience, right? I talked about it at my sentencing. And when you have that experience and you go to the other side of the veil, you understand, you have a life review. You see your whole life, everything that happened to you. And you see what's important and what's unimportant. And you see what matters in life. So what matters in life is how you react to things, how you treat other people, and the love that you give while you're here on earth.
So several things I want to note here. Again, usually Mormons will have what's called Fast Sunday. I believe this is several religions that this takes place, but they have fast and testimony. And during testimony, it is what it sounds like. They give this testimony of experiences and things that are part of this belief. And this is very much what I'm hearing from Lori here. This testimony she's given, but it is a referential shift. It becomes preaching. It is, again, verbally putting herself superior to at least this interviewer and others who she believes is listening in. It becomes a bit of preaching here, her taking matters into her own hands, teaching the religion of Mormonism, but leading this interviewer to believe that this is what she personally is experiencing. There's that referential shift there, though. It's not, I will experience this, I believe this. It's, when you do this, you will experience this. And you see the eyebrow flashes and the forehead creasing. This significance to these things that she wants to preach and emphasize the importance of to whoever is listening. Then her chin goes up, and this becomes a bit more of a superior, confident, challenging position towards the interviewer. What we're about to see also that I want you to pay attention to is she will bare her teeth even and raise her eyebrows. There will be wrinkling of the nose and this aggression that appears as she verbally challenges this interviewer to disagree with her, basically telling this interviewer, don't you dare disagree with me. This is what it is, and you cannot argue that back. I will not listen to it. I will not change my own beliefs. And again, this isn't something that is just strictly associated to Mormonism. That is not the belief of all Mormons everywhere, but that is what she wants people to believe, is that this is what it is correct, it is perfect, it does not need to be changed. And that's typical more of someone with antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, people who refuse to change their viewpoints and their perspectives. They value particular things, and usually that puts them in control and power of some sort, and that is very much what we are seeing here.
That's it.
She felt no, everything was the best call in that moment.
No, I felt like I should have joy in every situation, which is what I was taught to do in heaven.
So you had a list of witnesses you could call, your parents, your sister, even your brother again, but you chose not to. And I think you resting without calling anybody was a surprise to everybody who had been following the trial. What went into that decision?
So did you read any of the motions that were filed precluding my sister and my mother from speaking about certain subjects?
Some of them, yeah.
As in, did you read any of the motions that were precluding me from asking certain questions to the law enforcement?
Yes.
First, we see eye accessing, her looking up and thinking, what am I going to say? Recalling information. She starts off with this eye accessing here when she's saying, and then she starts talking about when I go to heaven, and then her tone lowers, which can be a form of manipulation. Her wanting to have this interviewer believe that she is innocent in some manner. That could very much be what we are hearing here. And it could also be fading facts. Usually with fading facts, though, the tone would be a bit lower and dropping gradually as she continues. That's not what I'm hearing. It just instantly drops, and it becomes this innocent, almost childlike voice that we hear, which is a form of manipulation. Again, more typical with people who have sociopathy or narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy, and not someone who is just trying to have this normal discussion with this interviewer about, what took place, how surprised she was, how unsurprised she was, and what her beliefs are. There is also narrowing of the palpable fissures, her squinting almost towards this interviewer as she focuses on and is perhaps skeptical of whether this interviewer has read what really took place. This is also a bit of a verbal challenge here, her saying, did you really see what's going on? Do you really know what's taking place here? And verbally putting herself superior again to this interviewer, this defensiveness she takes towards this interviewer who isn't in charge of a verdict, isn't in charge of what took place, and she would otherwise have no reason to be defensive towards this interviewer, but she puts herself superior to her.
So, and did you see all the people that they struck from my witness list? Yes. Okay. So,
what did that leave you with?
That's what I'm saying. In the judicial system, the way that it works is they really don't let you put on a defense. They just don't. They don't let you put on your defense the way that you want to present it. So you think, and this is what I thought too, because you're naive when you go into it, right? Like, I didn't know, I was 46 years old the first time I was ever arrested. I didn't know how the system worked. I didn't know any of that. So
now we see a lot of indications of stress, rapid blink rate, and her head is moving all over the place. In emphasis to her words, she's also illustrating with her hands, illustrators being movements of your hands and emphasis and in regards to what you're saying, in relation to what you're saying. So you're seeing a lot of that take place with aggressive, emphatic head movements, eyebrow flashes, a rising of the lip. She's very angry about the judicial system, about how she is now verbally putting herself in the place of a victim where she did not do anything wrong, absolving herself of accountability here, which again is more typical of a sociopath or someone with narcissistic personality disorder, and becoming increasingly defensive and stressed out about this not being her fault. The judicial system is the issue, the process of things is the issue, her lack of witnesses is the issue, not her actions, not her behaviors, not her ending the lives of her children. And interestingly, this clashes with the idea that she had to do this and that she is still a saint and that she is not guilty, that she is innocent, because she's putting herself in control. She's being very aggressive and angry about circumstances and not her own behaviors. Whereas if she did truly believe that her children were possessed, that she had to do this, we would perhaps see more understanding and more verbal guiding of this is what I did and this is what I had to do. And even though this took place, I understand that this is how the law sees things, but this is still what I value, and this is what I had to do, and I will continue to defend that instead of being the victim of circumstances, of the process of judicial system and this lack of witnesses.
Think they get to tell their side and you get to tell your side. And you think that's the way that it works. And it doesn't. It doesn't work that way at all. And in a high profile case like this, there's money and jobs and things that are going on way behind the scenes that nobody sees. I mean, what you saw, it's even interesting. So think about this. What you saw, how many different things did you see than what the jury saw? Because you see the arguing of motions. You see all the things that the prosecutor's saying behind the scenes, and they don't get to even see any of that. So it's the way that the system works, and it's what it does. And so, yeah, they precluded you basically from having a defense. They precluded you from talking about the things that would be most important to prove.
I just want to bring up here that, of course, she is very illustrative, very expressive, very angry. You do see the downward glabella furrowing. The muscles between her eyes go down in a more unnatural manner, and the scrunching of the nose and her aggression and anger here, along with the emphatic movements in the illustrations. You see a lot of this here. She becomes far more expressive as this is truly what she believes, but then you hear her referential shift as she goes back to being a preacher, a pastor, someone teaching someone something. In this case, it's her telling this interviewer that you should see, but you didn't see this, and you should see this, and you didn't. And this level of aggression and control that perhaps would make anybody listening in unsurprised that she committed this crime in the first place. That someone with this level of aggression and anger and defensiveness would commit this sort of crime in the first place. Now, that's not always the case. Anger and aggression can come out when someone's being wrongfully accused, when they're actually being wrongfully accused, and in fact, a lack of anger around that sort of situation would be more of an indicator that that person is perhaps guilty of the crime. But we're very much seeing someone who is angry. She's not angry about being accused. She's angry about the process, how she's the victim of this process. But there's these referential shifts where it becomes not about her own experiences, and it's a form of manipulation. And even now you see the opening of the palpable fissures around her eyes there, this widening of eyes, and the tension in the lower jaw, this aggression, anger, and defensiveness that comes out as she's trying to tell the interviewer, I am the victim. This is just how the process works, and it shouldn't work this way. I would know. I know everything. Didn't you see this? Didn't you not see this? And that's what we were seeing here.
Your case. So if the judge precludes all those things, what are you supposed to get up and say?
I guess in your case, though, you could have testified.
That's true.
Why not?
So there's a lot of reasons. The way that the system works, if I were to really explain, because now being behind the scenes of the system, I mean, obviously you see things differently, but it's very interesting what the state is allowed to do. So if you put on any kind of a case.
Now she has been caught off guard. She was asked, well, why didn't you testify? You could have testified. And Lori's caught off guard a bit here. So I want you to notice, at first there's this connection here. She's very focused, very connected through eye contact and leaning forward. But then she's told, you could have testified, and she puts some distance. She breaks eye contact. She looks away. This isn't someone that likes this lack of control. She disagrees with this. There's this slight, subtle shifting of the jawline there, this disagreement and discomfort around this. And that, along with the downward glabella furrowing, that is unnatural to her baseline. She's uncomfortable with this bit of a challenge, but instead she performatively smiles. It's not a genuine smile. She puts on this charm, which is more typical of a sociopath or a psychopath, two ends of the same thing. And what we see is someone trying to bring this interviewer back onto her side and believe that you would think that I could do this, but I can't do this. I'm still the victim. I'm friendly. I'm not someone who is angry. She's toning that way down, that level of aggression, and going back to being charming, switching roles here to basically see what sticks with this interviewer, what this interviewer is more prone to believe. And she has basically been told, not the aggression. The aggressive side isn't working out for her. Her being defensive and challenging isn't working out. So we're going to see more charm and manipulation and her trying something else, shifting gears here.
Okay, any kind of defense. One person, like one detective. Say the detective Moffat that they didn't put on the stand, right? I really wanted to put him on the stand. You want to cross-examine him. Well, he was the case agent for the first, year and a half or something like that. So he's the one that talked to everybody. He's the one that found out all the information. And they didn't put him on at all. And I think that was because of the exhibits that I was proposing were mainly of him, right? So they didn't put him on at all because they didn't want me to cross-examine him on the stand. So if I put up anybody, if I put up one person, then they get to put on a whole nother case after that. They get to put on a rebuttal case after that.
It continues to see this level of control and her feeling superior to this interviewer and the judicial system. She's verbally still putting herself superior. Even non-verbally, she is putting herself superior. With her chin out, she's very confident. This isn't turtling and shrinking and drooping of features. She's very confident, very prideful, very illustrative with what she's doing, very expressive. There's a lot of eyebrow flashing and forehead creasing around. I would have. And this smile that comes across her face as she says, I would have put this man, guiding this interviewer to believe that this would be a good thing with that smile, and this is important, and I am in charge. If I was in charge, I would have done a better job than the judicial system. Then what took place here, things would have gone correctly. And this level of control that you would see, that makes sense that she would commit the crime that she committed. And perhaps that was a power play, a form of control that we're very much seeing in this very interview.
So they can, and I think this is like the MO of the state. So this is how trial works. Like they put on their case, and then you put on your case, and then they can go back and put on a whole nother case. Like they kind of save it for the end. And so there's strategy involved, and there's, I think of couples retreat. I'm a big movie buff, so I think of things, and I think I've studied yoga and Tai Chi and the art of war. I mean, that's kind of like, it's crazy what really is going on behind this.
So you didn't want Trina K to get back up there and present a lot more.
It seems now she's also shifting gears again to seeming to be detached from reality, living in this fantastical world of movies and books, things she's read, and being knowledgeable at the same time and in control at the same time. Since this was not consistent, I'm not inclined to believe personally that she is detached from reality, that this is The world that she lives in is all fantastical, even though her narrative pinned to this crime is something that seems fantastical, absurd, bizarre, and not normal, very antisocial. She has penned this narrative that spiritually she had to do this for the sake of getting into heaven, for the sake of her children getting into heaven, that she'll see them beyond this veil, and what Mormons typically would believe in. She brings that into her crime. Again, there she's preaching to this interviewer saying, this is how the judicial system works. Even though prior to this, she had asked this interviewer, weren't you there? Would know how this works, as she had been in the trial, in the courtroom, and probably has multiple times for multiple other cases. But at the very least, she is seeing how this plays out in the case of Lori herself in that trial, and she would know how this works and would not need to be preached to. But Lori puts herself superior verbally, and again, non-verbally. She's not shrinking herself down, turtling, closing in her shoulders, bearing. You don't see any barriers. You don't see anything that indicates she's not confident and proud of herself here and feeling superior to others.
Would you have wanted the jurors to know that she's dead?
I was precluded from giving out that information. So that's the way the law works, right? We were both precluded. So that made it very awkward, don't you think?
But let's say you weren't. Would you have preferred the jurors to know that Tylee was dead?
What we see here now, as the discussion has shifted to talking about Tylee, her daughter, who she ended the life of. Interestingly, the interviewer has to direct her to discuss this, as she has, throughout this interview, failed to discuss Tylee, failed to bring her up. Pretty telling of what she's about to say, which is that she was kept from talking about Tylee, from saying that she did this crime, that this took place, that Tylee was dead and not missing. Again, putting herself verbally in the position of victimhood, and you start to see an increase in blink rate again, some stress there that comes out. So we are seeing signs of stress, but it's coming around her being challenged to talk about Tylee. This brought up that perhaps the jurors didn't know something and she is the victim of the judicial system and the process. Again, that is what she wants this interviewer to believe, that she's a victim here, not her children that she ended the life of, not anyone else in this case, just her. She's the real victim, and we don't see the grief we should see. We don't see tears. We don't see the drooping of palpable fissures or any grief or sadness around discussing her daughter's death that we would expect to see. But today I'm analyzing the Chris Watts case, which almost everyone has heard of by now. He ended the lives of his wife and his children. So let's get into it.
Right now we're at your house. Right now it's got K9 units, the sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent and see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere. And right now it's just like they've been on point. They're going through the house trying to get a scent, and hopefully they can.
The first few things I want to know are that there are no emphasis behaviors here. No illustrators which emphasize things in relation to what you're saying, such as I'm moving this box from here to here, or this is what I mean. Those are illustrators. We're not seeing any of that. We're not seeing any eyebrow flashes or forehead creasing, anything really exclaiming that this is the point and bringing significance to any of this. Now, this interview in particular is prior to, of course, Shanann and the kids being discovered as deceased and Chris Watts being the person who did it. We're seeing instead a lot of shoulder-shrugging behaviors, uncertainty, but he is not truly uncertain as to what took place or what is taking place. So we're not seeing a lot of clusters, just some very brief shoulder-shrugging, very nonchalant shoulder-shrugging around this is just what's happening. He's very casual. His stance is very casual. Now, when our arms are crossed like this at the start of a video, of any interview, that is the baseline. That is a casual stance. That is not a barrier behavior. He's not feeling angry or defensive in any capacity. Verbally, what he's expressing here is they are looking, they're doing their best, not we are looking. He's not on the team of people looking for his wife, which we of course know why, but if you knew nothing about this case, that's what's taking place here, and it's an indication of someone who is guilty of something. Someone who does not care at the very least about their family going missing.
Pick something up to where it's going to lead to something.
What happened? Your wife came out and tell me what's.
She came home from the airport 2 a.m. and I left around 5:15. She was still here. And like about 12:10 and that afternoon, her friend Nicole showed up at the door. Like I had texted Shanann a few times that day, called her, say, but she never got back to me, but she wasn't getting back to any of her people as well. And that's what really concerned a lot of people, is like, she's not getting back to her, but like, she doesn't get back to me, that's fine. Like, she gets busy during the day, but she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning. And Nicole called me when she was at the door. And that's
So here we see more shoulder shrugging, more brief, casual shoulder shrugging, and verbally he's setting the scene for this just being a common thing for him to not really care if Shanann calls back, if she responds, because he just knows she gets busy. But what he's saying a lot and what he's expressing a lot here is that she has a lot of friends and they're concerned about her. Now, most likely all of her friends are not bombarding Chris with text and calls, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to know all about a lot of people being concerned about her being missing. Maybe one or two people may have called. He also keeps pointedly looking towards the door and saying Nicole, and there's an eyebrow flash around Nicole, some emphasis around that, but nothing else in this. His blink rate is increased a bit here as well, perhaps a little bit of stress around this, then a bit of a tongue jut behavior, very stressed, which we do know by now that he was being deceptive.
That's when I came home and then walked in the house and nothing was vanished. Nothing was here. I mean, she wasn't here. The kids weren't here. Nobody was here.
What's your wife's name?
Shanann, Shann, and
What's your kids?
Bella and Celeste.
And Spall, Celeste.
Celeste.
How old are you?
4, Bella's 4, Celeste is 3.
There's a bit of contempt when he says nothing was here. His mouth goes up a bit, and then there's some eye-blocking behavior, some aversion to this, and then some emphasis around she wasn't here, the kids weren't here, nobody was here, the eyebrow flashing, the forehead creasing goes away, around nobody was here, and that's significance to the wife and kids without any feelings of shame or anger about why they were not there, or sadness and remorse around why they were not here. We don't see upward glabella furrowing, any concern. That's considered a grief muscle there between your eyebrows. The glabella, no furrowing there, no indications that he feels sorrow about this at all, which of course we do know why, but if we did not know why, this is very much an indication of someone who's hiding something.
And so, how many times did you try calling her?
I called her 3 times, texted her about 3 times just to say, what's going on? Like I could after I called her and texted her once, it's like, all right, maybe she was just busy. Like she just got back, like everybody's probably calling her from her trip. She just got back from Arizona, and I figured she was just busy. But when her friend showed up, that's what it was like. It registered like, all right, this isn't right.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now I don't even want to just like throw anything out there. Like, I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe.
So he expresses verbally even more that a lot of people have been calling Shanann and wondering where she's at. Again, how would he know this? A lot of people probably have not bombarded him. He probably doesn't have everybody's number that's a friend of Shanann's, and they most likely don't all have his. And there's a bit of stress there as he scratches the upper bit of his mouth, and then his upper lip goes up as he says, I don't even want to throw anything out there. More of a blink rate than we've seen prior to this. A little bit of stress here as he says again that everybody's been calling, everybody's been concerned, and not putting himself in this group of people that have been searching, that have been concerned, that have been calling. And it doesn't make sense for him to say that he texted her once, figured she was busy, but called her 3 times, and is in conflict with other things that he's stated.
Like, I want them back now. Like that's what's in my head. Like, if they're safe right now, they're gonna come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. Like, if they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just like barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here.
I'm gonna ask some kind of tough questions. Your relationship with the kids.
I mean, my kids are my life. I mean, those smiles, like.
Some emphasis around the kids are my life with the forehead creasing and the eyebrow flashing there, but again, no upper glabella furrowing, no concern, no genuine concern, sorrow, remorse, and he doesn't put himself on the team of people who have been concerned, who have been searching, who are frantic about this, who are genuinely worried. He says, these people have been searching, these people have been looking for Shanann and the kids, hopefully they're safe, but he uses several sentences that don't go together, that clash, that don't make sense. comments that are very hard to follow in this one particular bit. It's intended to be confusing, and it's also very difficult for the brain to lie. So it's very difficult for him to, in this moment, tell the interviewer, hopefully they're safe, I hope they're both together, something that we should be able to fluently tell an interviewer or anyone out there looking for our missing family. Again, no genuine sorrow, no grief, no shame, no remorse, no defensiveness, which is also interesting. He doesn't seem defensive. He does gulp a bit in this one bit, as the police are mentioned. Perhaps some stress there, of course, because it is the police and he is most likely guilty. We do know by now he is guilty, but again, if we did not know that information, this is the kind of thing that I would look for.
Up my life, and this, like, I mean, last night, like, during, like, when they usually eat dinner, it was just like I missed them. Like, I mean, I missed telling them, hey, you got to eat that or you're not gonna get your dessert, and it's like you're not gonna do your snack after. I missed that. Like, I missed them, cuddle up on their couches. They have like a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just like, I was, it was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that last night. And for nobody to be here last night and to go into their rooms and know that I wasn't going to turn the rain.
When it comes to body language analysis, I look for nonverbal and verbal incongruence, which is very much what we're seeing here. Him expressing, it tore me up. I really needed this to take place. I really needed the kids to be there. But non-verbally, what he's expressing is positive. He has a lot of positive tonality, no vertical lines on his face. There's no indications of exhaustion. He's not disheveled in any manner. He's not genuinely broken apart by the fact that his family is missing. No glabella furrowing upwards. Nothing that indicates that he's angry or aggressive towards who could have perhaps taken his family, where they could have been, his wife taking off with the kids. Any anger towards this whatsoever. I'm not seeing any grief, anything going on there except for positive tonality, which is not what we would expect. Him genuinely almost laughing at bits of this interview.
Machine's on. I know that I wasn't going to turn the monitor on. I know I wasn't going to kiss them to bed tonight. It was, that's why last night was just horrible. I couldn't do it. I want everybody to just come home. Right, wherever they're at, come home. That's what I want.
Where is she gone? Why? She was on. She came back Sunday.
So then we see several referential shifts, which is typical of someone who is lying, who doesn't know quite if they want to stay in the present or past tense. Now, there's a bit of confusion there when it comes to whether trauma is involved or anything like that, but normally we would very much see someone exhausted, completely disheveled, someone genuinely concerned and broken apart, afraid, or angry even, perhaps, when it comes to their missing family. Someone frantic, someone putting themselves in a team of people looking for their missing family. In this particular bit I just showed, though, there's emphasis around, I just couldn't do it, and then more tongue-jutting behaviors, some perhaps stress there, dried mouth, and then a lot of lip compressions. Him hiding his lips, hiding his thoughts. It's very prominent as he is hiding something. Of course, again, we know what that is by now, but if you did not know this, would be very alarming. Today I'm analyzing the body language of Candace, the mother of missing 5-year-old Summer Wells. This particular interview is on Dr. Phil's channel, of course. I will leave the full video in the description box below. Let's get into it.
You took Summer in the front door.
Yes.
And you said to the 3 boys, keep an eye on Summer.
Yes.
Okay. Then you did what?
Then I went back outside to my mom's camper, which was right next to the house. And I had to fix her knee brace for her.
Okay. She had knee brace on?
Yeah.
And that took?
Only 2 minutes.
Okay. And then what'd you do?
I went back in the house.
When you went back in, what'd you see?
The 3 boys sitting there watching TV.
Okay. And no Summer?
No Summer.
Okay. What'd you do then?
I asked the boys where she was at. And they told me that she went downstairs to play with her toys.
So even though that it was a short bit of time, there are already so many things going on. First, I want to note that substance use can affect someone's body language and how that can be analyzed. It can definitely slow things down or speed things up. What we're seeing here, I am not certain is substance use, though it has been speculated that she and her husband have substance use issues. I am noticing that there's a lot of drooping of features, so when there's something uplifting, then that would indicate something else is going on in that particular moment, and that's going to become important here very shortly. Often, even when substance use is involved, there's some sort of consistency of slowing down or speeding up of behaviors. And what we're seeing here is a bit of a drool. Some drooping of features, and uplifting of features would be the opposite of that and would require a bit more energy and would veer away from her baseline in this video. I'm also aware of her story changes, which of course someone who is not guilty of something wouldn't have to do. They would not have to change their story so frequently. But in this one interview, what we're focused on is, of course, the veering away of baseline, anything that indicates something has changed, there's some discomfort. And we see that when he says, so you took her, Summer Wells, inside the house, and there's a bit of eye blocking there. Otherwise, there's no real blink rate. Anything indicating stress aside from when that one moment takes place, when she says that she took Summer into the house. And then we see some jaw shifting and lip licking behaviors, all indications of potential deception. There's a cluster of behaviors there that indicate something else is going on.
Okay. Would she do that? Would she say, hey, I'm going downstairs to play with my toys, or would she just go?
No, she'd tell the boys.
What'd you do then?
Well, I hollered for her at first.
And no response.
No response.
So what'd you do?
So I went directly down there. I looked for her everywhere I could look. In the room, under the blankets, whatever. And then she was gone.
All right. What's the way to get out of there besides coming back upstairs?
Just the basement door.
That back door?
Yeah.
Okay. And if that door opens, could the boys hear it?
No, if they had the TV up loud.
Okay.
There are specific moments in this where she nods her head like this. It's not controlled. It's a very natural shaking of the head there. And typically when we're in disbelief of something or we want to emphasize something with head nods, it would be a more controlled, larger movement there. But what we're seeing is a more natural shaking of the head, no, even when she's saying things in the affirmative. Now, that itself does not mean that she's being deceptive. That alone would not say that she's lying about the situation, but it's pretty interesting where it pops up when she says that she would typically tell the boys that the Summer would typically say that she was in the basement playing, that she was going to go down there. And Dr. Phil himself raises a very valid question there when he says, now, would Summer typically tell the boys that she's going to the basement, or would she just head down there, which would be more typical of a 5-year-old to do, to just head down to the basement where she would like to play, especially if this is an everyday occurrence where she just typically goes to the basement. So it raises some questions there as to whether this was even typical behavior of Summer Wells to do, to head to a basement to play by herself, to tell her brothers that that's what she was going to do, and for her brothers who had been instructed to watch Summer Wells to just ignore this and stay put. So all of this raises valid questions and valid concerns, and Dr. Phil basically points that out with the question, would that typically take place where she would let her brothers know that's where she was headed? And that's where you start to see the subtle head nods pop up where perhaps she's not entirely telling the truth. And then she states that she came in, she calls for Summer Wells, and then she says she checks under the blankets and whatever, indicating the specific place where she looked for her 5-year-old daughter, under blankets, why she would believe her daughter was under blankets, especially not seeing perhaps a large figure under a blanket or anything like that. Maybe a pile of blankets would be more reasonable to check under for a potential body for her daughter, but she's very specific about certain things, like where specifically she checked, and then her chin goes out as she says that. There's that eye block, and then again the jaw shifting a bit in discomfort, some micro expressions there that indicate she doesn't even fully agree with what she's saying and her own narrative around this. But she's very specific about where she's checking on her daughter under blankets, and then she notes a basement, she notes in a bit a back door, and moments of time, specific time gaps that would not be natural in an otherwise chaotic situation where this should be a frantic search for her daughter. And it's also assumed and unnatural that Summer Wells is missing immediately when she steps back into the house. So on the surface, it seems that she's a mother who just was curious about where Summer Wells went, but it very quickly turns into a frantic search. She does not note that it's frantic, though. It doesn't turn frantic in her own narrative. As she's describing this sequence of events, that is actually unnatural.
Is she known to go out that back door?
She'll go out the back door, but then she'll circle around by her swing.
Okay. Back around to the front?
Yeah.
What we're seeing here is looking out that back door, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Now, there's a road there. Is that a
Driveway.
driveway? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, can that be seen from your mother's camper?
No.
That's the back side of the house. You can't see that from her camper.
Not that part, no.
If you step out on a road there, you can about see your camper.
And that drive there goes up to the highway?
It circles around the house right there. It goes to the top, and then it goes down around to it. It circles all the way around the house.
Okay. Is that the back door?
That's the back door.
That's the door to her room?
Yes.
Okay. If she came out that back door and there was somebody there, could they have grabbed her right there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then how would they make their escape? Back this direction?
Well,
Away from the camper?
the dogs led the scent, went straight down that dog trail by that yellow gym.
I want to note right here that a few things also don't add up in this very part of the narrative here. When Summer Wells is taken back inside, allegedly, Candace asks the boys, the brothers, to watch the 5-year-old, but then notes that they weren't watching her necessarily when she goes down into the basement. Now, it's not that they have to keep an eye on her and basically breathe down her neck, but it's pretty interesting that nobody follows her down into the basement, and that this seems to be typical behavior for her to say that she's going into the basement as a 5-year-old and nobody's going to watch her there, but then might head out the back door. No one's watching whether she heads out the back door or not, and that is then typical behavior for this 5-year-old to go out the back door and then typically go around to the swings. But Candace doesn't say anywhere in this that she looked towards the swings for her 5-year-old daughter. She notes several other places. She goes back to this blue thing in the backyard, this area where this blue thing is, and she goes elsewhere. She goes to the grandmother's trailer. She goes any other place than the swing set. And this is in the several interviews that I've seen of this case where Candace does not note the swing set, looking at the swing set, but in this interview notes, it would be typical for the 5-year-old to get out the back door and go towards the swing set to circle back around. It would not be normal for her to go straight out the back door. And it's also normal in her narrative, in her words, for this 5-year-old girl to be watched by her brothers while she's confined in a house, but not when she goes outside, so no one's watching whether she's going outside, and it's typical for her to go outside. What I would expect, what I believe anyone would expect here, is that if the brothers were going to watch her, the brothers would be with her as she goes out to the swing set. Something would have happened to one of the brothers if Summer herself had been abducted by this strange man that has suddenly appeared on 11 acres, by the way, of this property. A lot just does not add up. It's not reasonable. But non-verbally, what we see here is, again, aversion, eye blocking in specific instances, and her uncontrolled head shaking there in moments where we should not see it. And then earlier we even saw an uplifting of features, an asymmetrical eyebrow flash as she says blankets, and her shoulder even goes up. It's asymmetrical, but it's pretty interesting. It veers away from the baseline as she's saying blankets. So far she's really specific about basement, blankets, back door. Not the swing set, not other things that she's noting would be typical of this 5-year-old to do. And on an 11-acre property, I would assume that if she's going to have the brothers watch this 5-year-old, the 5-year-old will not be allowed freely to roam out the back door onto the swing set without anybody noticing this. That's as far as Candace says anything in this interview. She does say, yeah, as the father here says a strong yes to the potential abduction of this girl, Summer Wells. It seems he's more confident in saying, yes, this is possible, she was abducted, than Candace, the mother, is stating that it is, as she says, yeah, not as confident as the father here. But there's no more nonverbal cues from the mother, nothing else from the mother in this particular interview. If you'd like to see me analyze another interview in this case from the mother, or even the father's nonverbal cues here, please let me know in the comment section. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Today I'm analyzing the body language of Brian Kohberger in the victim impact statement part of the trial. This particular video comes from CBS 21 News. I'll try to leave that link in the description box below. Let's get started.
I'd like to start by thanking the court for allowing me the time and opportunity to speak today. My name is Olivia, and I am the big sister of Kaylee Gonzalez, and I was blessed to love Madison Mogan as a sister too. I'm not here today to speak in grief. I'm here to speak in truth. Because the truth is, my sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They were two pieces of a whole, the perfect yin and yang. They are everything that you could never be.
Let's talk about his stance here, because he's not a very attentive stance. It invites curiosity, but also is one of someone who perhaps feels a bit threatened. He isn't challenging the person speaking. His chin is not up. He's not revealing that vulnerable part of his body there. It's a bit down. His shoulders are up, a bit tense. His arms are at his side like this, a bit open, but this is the stance of someone who's not submitting himself to the grief and the anger in the room, or to any emotion. It gives him this illusion of control that he actually does not have in this trial. But this is something we would very much do if we are feeling perhaps threatened, sitting like this, appearing to be superior to the person speaking, even if that is not reality. So he's very much not submitting himself to emotions here, though his lips thin out a bit. He has a little bit of content there, but not a high blink rate or anything else going on. That really confirms that that is exactly what we're seeing. We're not seeing anything else going on. Now, despite any diagnosis he may or may not have, what we're looking at here is a man who wants to feel in control, and that isn't specific to any diagnosis. Everyone to some extent wants to feel that they are in control, but we're not seeing any real levels of anxiety, just discomfort a bit around not feeling in control of the situation. Again, he's not submitting himself to any grief and anger that's in the room. He's not necessarily reacting fully to what's being said, and he is at one point looking around, watching the reactions of people in the room, seeing what's going on, and again, giving himself this feeling of control that he otherwise would not feel in this situation.
Loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. The truth about Kaylee and Maddie is they would have been kind to you. If you had approached them in their everyday lives, they would have given you directions, thanked you for the compliment, or awkwardly giggled to make your own words less uncomfortable for you. In a world that rejected you, they would have shown mercy. Because the truth is, I'm angry. Every day I'm angry. I'm left shouting at the inside of my own head.
There is one blink that occurs there very briefly, very subtly, when she says that he would have been shown mercy. He perhaps does not believe this. Otherwise, there is nothing going on there. No reaction at all to anything in this specific bit. He perhaps does not fully believe that he would have been shown mercy in the same situation. It's possible and likely that he believes that all people are like himself, that he is not really all that abnormal, even though this is a man who non-verbally is not having any reaction to emotional stimuli, which is typical of those who have antisocial personality disorder. But again, I'm not really here to diagnose anyone. I'm not going to discuss whether he is actually a psychopath or has autism. This is just non-verbally what I would see in anyone, someone who would otherwise feel threatened if they weren't sitting in such a stance. There is a point in this where he closes off his body and he does perhaps feel a lot of discomfort when specific people speak up, as opposed to everything else we see in this particular trial where he doesn't appear to react at all. But you do see very much that his shoulders are tensed up. Even though he appears casual, this is not a casual stance. He is trying to give himself this feeling of some control. And if he does have antisocial personality disorder, something that sociopaths and psychopaths hate the most is feeling a lack of control. Now, again, I'm not going to say that that is specific to a diagnosis, though, because a lot of people who don't have antisocial personality disorder also would like to feel in control of a lot of situations, especially a situation like this. So that in itself does not point to whether he is or isn't a sociopath or psychopath. The lack of blink rate, the lack of reaction to emotional stimuli does indeed point to that specific diagnosis. But again, I am not here to diagnose him.
Everything I wish I could say to you. The truth about me is when I heard the news, I didn't cry. I listened for them. I promised them I would, that I would fight for them, that I would show up no matter what it cost me. I swore I'd never let them feel alone. Because you see, I've always been their heavyweight. I've always been the one to fight the battles they didn't feel ready to fight themselves. All it ever took was a call, and they knew I would handle it for them, no matter the time, no matter the cost. They could wave their white flag because they knew I would never back down, not for them. And not even death could change that. Somewhere along the line, I started to think about what I would say to them if I was given just one last chance.
Imagine you're in a business meeting and you are the supervisor in the situation. You're attentive, you're in control, you're the one in power here, and someone finally says something that's in agreement to what you've said. You might move forward. And that's very much what we see here. Again, this illusion that he has some control in this situation. He moves forward when the person speaking says, wave this white flag. This is an agreement, and he moves forward, feeling a bit less threatened there, a bit curious about what's about to be stated. As someone has mentioned that there would be some form of submission, surrender there, white flag being symbolic of someone who would surrender. Although a lot of what she discusses here is that she would fight. And there's a brief blink there when she says the word that she would fight. Again, this is a threat to Brian Koberger's control or illusion of control there, bring him a bit of discomfort there. Now, there's not a lot that shows that he feels highly uncomfortable there, but just that brief blink there, that veering away from baseline that we see, and she mentions she would fight, and he knows this means fight him, and that breaks his illusion of control there, that someone would perhaps try to gain the upper hand and some power of the situation. He does not like that. Most likely, again, there's not this large cluster of behaviors that really confirms that. I can't say that for sure, but I believe very much that's what we're seeing here. Today I'm analyzing the body language of Casey Anthony. I'm sure you know who that is by now, and this comes from a channel called Interrogation Archive. I will try to leave a link to their channel in the description box below. I also want to note before we begin that the audio and video quality of this is not something I can personally control, so I apologize. Let's begin.
So, I was afraid that some of what I said to them probably offended them because I told them that if I find out something that you don't want to hear, I'm going to tell you anyway.
Well, honestly, they'll respect that. That's just, the type of people that they are in the same way.
Normally when people start to rub their arms or their legs or any movement like that, that is what is called an adapter. Self-soothing behaviors and indicates anxiety. Of course, what we're seeing here instead is just her discomfort with being handcuffed. This makes sense. Handcuffs most likely are hurting her, but she's making this big display out of it and making sure that everyone in the room or watching in any capacity knows that this is uncomfortable to her and that she does have these handcuffs on and wants them off. At the same time, she's listening closely to what this interrogator is saying and putting herself in the place of someone who would respect him should he say something that might be offensive. It is an indication of someone who is trying to get along with the interrogator and seem very friendly, very agreeable, and very cooperative. Along with that, I want to note that this is, of course, a woman who has lost her daughter. And so far, we're not seeing any emotion around that, any questions around that, any indication that she is concerned at all about finding her daughter. This interrogation is quite a bit of time after her being arrested for her missing daughter, of course, but there still is no discussion about that whatsoever. That is a bit alarming to people as the entire interrogation, her being arrested in the first place, is about her missing daughter, and there has been no question, no mention of that at all. That's not of importance to her, no connection to that child, and that is alarming.
I know they are, but when I hit up with certain things, they don't want to hear it, and I understand that.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean I'm not going to say it.
Exactly. When you have different beliefs than somebody, it is hard sometimes to hear their opinion.
That's true.
That doesn't mean that they don't respect your opinion or the fact that you're coming forward with what you think or what you feel. So
you don't quite see it up close, but there is a bit of an eyebrow flash around their opinion. She brings significance to this, and most likely there's forehead creasing going on as she raises her eyebrows. This is important to her people's opinions. That, along with her then starting to move her hair away from her face, again would typically be an adapter, an indication that there's some anxiety there. In this case, along with what she's verbally stating, tells me she very much cares about how she is viewed, and not so much about what's taking place. And this isn't necessarily an indication of anxiety, just her self-grooming.
Well, to some extent it's comforting to hear you say that because it was never my intention to piss anybody in your family off. I'm not in it to get a conviction. I get nothing out of it. I get zero.
exactly, you have a job you're trying to do.
I found a few of them. I found a few that it sucks both ways.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it is what it is. Where I get sideways with people tends to be when I turn to you.
Well, verbally, she's further indicating that she's agreeable, this is casual, that she's not offended, and doesn't believe her family is offended by what this interrogator has said. She gets a little more still. There are less movements at this point. She's slowly starting to give up on moving around in her handcuffs and indicating these are on and they're uncomfortable. There's a lot less adapters and illustrators around this. When I say illustrators, I mean movements and emphasis and in relation to what she's stating. When she's saying you have to do what you have to do, that is an example of an illustrator. She's illustrating towards him, you have to do what you have to do. And in this manner, she places herself again on an agreeable side of this interrogator, being very friendly and very concerned with how he views her.
I've heard most people say that. They don't like attorneys very much.
I have many family members that are attorneys. I have no problems with attorneys. What I have problems with are, at some point, we have to set aside the rules and we have to find kids. And you know what? So be it. That's why I told you in the car. You know, if you tell me anything now, I'll get up and say, yep, I heard it, that should be invoked, and we can't use any of it. That's just the way it is. That's all that matters to me. And, you know.
Interestingly, when he says, and we have to find kids, she shrugs. It's not entirely with her shoulders, though it's not very committed, just with her hands, and then her eyebrows go up in acknowledgement of this statement. Again, this is the part where we would expect a mother in particular to have some emotion around this, to either be angry and remember that, oh, right, my kid is missing or has been found deceased and something needs to be done about this, especially when it's a mother who has not actually committed the crime, actually ended the life of their own child. You would see more emotion around this, more aggression, more willingness to find out who did the actual crime. Instead, we see someone who is very casual about this. No emotion, just acknowledgement of what has been stated, with a bit of a shrug there, indicating she acknowledges that he must do what he needs to do, which is find kids, and no indication of her wanting to be a part of that, wanting to cooperate and wanting to find her own child.
Did another case that I was involved in, you know, they lost a confession. And I sat there and I looked right at the guys that we worked with. I said,
That's not what's
who
important.
cares? We found her. We found her and he's going to get what was coming to him. That's not my job. You know? And
I also want to note that when she's just listening, she is very engaged, making clear eye contact with this interrogator. I can't tell if there's much of a blink rate or not. I assume not, especially given what I've seen of her and her trial, where there was almost no blink rate. And typically, a psychopath, someone who has antisocial personality disorder, does not react to emotional stimuli and would not have much of a blink rate because of that. I believe personally that is what we are seeing, but here in this interrogation room, I'm not sure. I cannot personally see a lot of her blink rate. She's very focused on this interrogator until he starts speaking, and then you start to see a lot of shrugging behaviors and what appears to be a bit of an eyebrow flash around acknowledgement of some things and some illustrators.
It's been a long day.
It has been.
How was my dad this morning?
In our time. Yeah. Honestly.
I only saw from the meeting, got a chance to hear him talking to my mom. I spoke to him on site this morning for just like a second before he left.
Now the handcuffs have been removed and she continues to be engaged in discussion with this interrogator. She asks very casually, how is my dad? It's with one hand. Now it's possible that her other hand was resting because of the restraint she was currently under with the handcuffs, some potential pain there and discomfort. Whenever there's an asymmetrical movement, however, that can be an indication of deception, of someone believing that they're going to get away with something or hide something. In this case, she brings up her dad. Her tone is very friendly, very upbeat, very positive, a lot of positive tonality. But there's this one movement, one illustrator is very asymmetrical there when she says, how is my dad? Asking about this as if she is genuinely interested in hearing about her dad. Now, this is someone who has contact with her dad and would not need to ask this interrogator about him. She's engaging in this seemingly friendly conversation, keeping it very casual. What we don't hear is, where is my daughter? Have you found anybody who is suspect aside from myself or anything along those lines? It's questions about her dad, how things went with her dad, and as some of us know from from the documentary, she has accused her father of things that were horrific, and it seems that she's just trying to get information about what he has told this interrogator, and the officers never went involved. She acknowledges with that, again, asymmetrical shrug there, that he has to do what he has to do. An acknowledgement of everybody's role in this except for her own.
So, yeah, I talked to him this morning for a little bit. He was with Mark, and yeah, he was really struggling. I mean, you can imagine he was having a hard time. He was being called in to essentially provide testimony to indict you, at least. And he was really struggling with that. And I felt bad for him, to be honest with you. I truly did.
Well, I even told him last night. I know he was subpoenaed, and under the law, he had to answer whatever questions were asked him. I told him to do what he had to do. At that point, if he didn't, he'd be held in contempt of court. I don't want to see that happen, so.
What did he say?
He just hugged me and told me that he loved me, and I know he was struggling with it even last night. So.
Her illustrators are an emphasis to her words and make sense, though they are still asymmetrical, until she says that he might be held in contempt of the court if he doesn't answer questions, and that she doesn't want that. Then her head is still again, there are no more head movements, and her hands are down. Then the illustrators start back up as she further discusses that he then hugged her, said that he loved her, and then you see that again. All of this seems very controlled, however, again, this is more appropriate for a psychopath, someone who has antisocial personality disorder. They're typically very in control, don't want to be viewed as weak, and are very interested in how they are viewed and getting more information so that they can further control what's taking place. We also see that self-grooming behavior as this interrogator mentions the word struggle. The word struggle seems to bring her some possible anxiety, and she perhaps doesn't like that word because she doesn't want to be viewed as weak and out of control. That word struggle is particularly, the word is invoking some kind of reaction out of her, or it's just that she is continuing to want to control how she is viewed with the self-grooming behaviors. Given that she seems to be otherwise comfortable and casual in this interaction, it's more likely that that invoked some sort of emotion with that word struggle.
I think it was probably emotional this morning.
Yeah, I could see that with the little bit that I saw from the media, from the pictures and the little bit of footage that they had. So.
You guys watching on TV?
Then we watched it online a little bit.
Really?
I try to stay away from the TV as much as possible. At least with the internet, I can scroll through, read what I want, and then just get rid of it that much faster. So.
You anxious about today?
I have been. I mean, this is something honestly we've been preparing for from the beginning, just because of words that were directly spoken from Yuri Melich and also from Sergeant Alvin.
You see a few more potential adapters, self-grooming behaviors, her pulling on her shirt, putting her hair behind her ears, and then those asymmetrical illustrators again. She rubs her arms at one point. That very much was an adapter and not just self-grooming. She does seem a bit anxious, and then he asks her, is this making you anxious? And she says, it did, it was, and puts that in past tense. Again, someone with antisocial personality disorder does not want to be viewed as weak and out of control. And to acknowledge and admit that she might be anxious would put her in a place of what she may view as potential weakness. Now, this isn't an absolute, a guarantee. Just interesting that she does put this verbally in past tense, and her illustrators are emphatic of that, but they are also in emphasis of her being currently anxious. She then says that they have been preparing, again, putting herself verbally in a place of control. All of this indicates that she continues to care about how she is viewed, and being weak is not how she wants to be viewed. Out of control is not how she wants to be viewed. She's been preparing, she was anxious, and she's in control also of the media that she consumes. She states that she's able to just scroll through social media, not so much when it comes to television. So she doesn't necessarily care about television, but about social media and how she is viewed on there.
They were saying that this is what they were planning on doing from the very beginning, from that first day. So they wrote me off within the first couple hours. So
I don't know if that's true.
that was the direct words that they pretty much gave to myself, and even they said that to my parents. So I mean, I'm not trying to say something derogatory towards someone, but
no, it's okay. We're just talking.
Yeah,
we're just chatting.
So that was the only time he ever made any effort to try to talk to me one-on-one.
Now there are some defensive behaviors we see popping up here as he says that he doesn't necessarily agree with what she's saying, and you see her chin go down, protecting that vulnerable part of her neck, and more illustrators. She's overly emphasizing here that, okay, well, this is what took place, and her illustrators are an emphasis to what she's saying, but very large in comparison to what we've seen so far. She doesn't necessarily like that he has disagreed with her, especially as she has been trying to appear very agreeable, very cooperative, and just acknowledges that he has to do what he has to do. This is all in conflict with what she had said earlier, where he stated that he might have said something offensive to her father, and she says, I'm sure they, most likely her father, his team, or whoever he had been allegedly offending, would respect that, respect him saying things that might be offensive, and she very quickly says, and I am very much the same way. But she's not confident in that, and now we're seeing why that is exactly, and that is that she most likely does care if she's in control, and if somebody is disagreeing with her. How she is viewed is very important to her. So now we're seeing her become a little more defensive about him saying that he does not agree with her.
And it's kind of difficult.
It was kind of difficult considering.
Obviously, in light of everything that's going on and the fact that you've been arrested for other things, makes it a little more difficult to sit down and even talk to you. It's not that we haven't wanted to.
But I do have counsel, and that's something that, my attorney's always been a phone call away. And it shouldn't have taken it getting to this point, 3 months in.
Has your attorney ever told you?
Now we continue to see more indications of her being in control. She has this counsel. She has that, again, asymmetrical, but it's in emphasis with what she's saying. She has this counsel, and there's that illustrator there. Yet when he says it's difficult, you see that self-grooming behavior. Again, her tucking her hair behind her ears and her tugging on her shirt. These are now adapters, that she's nervous about this. And then she says, difficult considering. She does not agree that this is difficult. And this particular word, again, seems to invoke some stress with her, most likely because she doesn't want to appear as weak, and something being difficult to her would put her in a position of being out of control. Then she says, I have counsel, and she verbally gives herself power back.
That we would like to speak to you.
And we had agreed, him and I together, that we would all sit down together, him and I, and you guys, and, we entertain whatever questions you have and discuss things.
We made it pretty clear that, we wanted to talk to you. I mean, obviously, we can't come to you and ask you.
Yeah, understandably.
Further large illustrators there, as she says, we would all, and she moves her hands all around, emphasizing all of us, there's this group of people, and we would all speak to you, and she says, entertain questions you may have. This puts herself in a position superior to him, or superior to whoever may question what they're saying, stating that they would entertain this as if this isn't something they would take seriously, but they would humor, they would answer for the sake of just having answers out there. This puts herself verbally superior to anyone asking questions and questioning her. So this, along with her potential emotions around words such as struggle and difficult, her defensiveness there with the chin going down and protecting that vulnerable part of her body around him being disagreeable, tells me that she, again, loves to be in control, believes she's above everyone, she's going to get away with this if she did commit the crime, that she doesn't like being questioned and does not like someone questioning her authority on things. All of this putting herself in a position of power and control, which typically psychopaths love. I'm not saying she is a psychopath for sure. I can't diagnose her, but that is what I believe we are very much seeing here. Then, for a great deal of this interrogation, the interrogator is walked out of the room, and she is just picking at her fingers, moving her hair around, resituating herself, just getting comfortable. Again, these could be adapters in certain points if there had been discussion around something, but this is just her getting comfortable, her controlling, again, how she is viewed, and caring about her glasses, her hair. There is no sign of stress, no sign of sadness, no grief around this, no anger, or any indication that she feels grief about her daughter. There have been no questions about her daughter. In fact, the interrogator has had to basically push her to talk about missing kids and why she is there.
He's going to ask you a question. You don't say anything else other than the answer. Okay?
Casey, based on our conversation today, and I read you that form, basically just the same thing I said to Mr. Byers over the phone. If there's been numerous requests or opportunities to speak with us and come to a resolution here. That's why we brought you here instead of the jail. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, based on your request for us to call him and bring him here, he's here. So what we're going to try to do is give you a few minutes somewhere that's not recorded. No secrets, I told you. This room's recorded. I have to be able to approach my chain and explain why. But first, I needed you to tell him, in your own words, if you will, that you'd like to take the opportunity to deal with us like you've made that request in the past. So, is that something you want to tell him?
I told him the same thing we talked about before, that we would entertain any questions that they have. We would listen and discuss it, and if we have something to respond, we'll respond.
Good. Do you want to speak to me in private?
Yes.
So we can.
She's now leaned forward, connected and engaged with and listening to the men who have just told her that the reason why she's here is that they wanted to give her a chance to further discuss why she was arrested in the first place and what's taking place. No indications of stress. You see some forehead creases very vaguely as the video quality is grainy and it's also dim, but what appears to be forehead creasing and an eyebrow raise an acknowledgement of what he's stating about there are some questions and he's going to give her the chance to have these questions take place without recording. She then leans forward and there's illustrators again as she's speaking and she says, I just told him that we would entertain questions, continuing to verbally put herself superior to whoever may question her. Today I'm analyzing the body language of Jennifer Soto, the mother of Madeline Soto, who was found deceased on March 2024. And this particular video comes from a channel called Hidden True Crime. I'll try to leave the link to that channel in the description box below. Let's get started.
Based on the evidence I've seen, based on the videos I've seen, I do believe. And with that being said, and the reason I tell you that not to be an asshole is because the thought process with us leads it in a different investigation, a different way. Meaning, whatever is what we have, right? We cannot change what happened most likely on Monday. We cannot change the fact that I believe that we killed her, right? All we can do now is find her as quickly as possible. On the 2% chance we're wrong, that she is alive, that's phenomenal.
This level of distress is not typical of a mother who has lost a child. I feel that's very obvious to point out, but non-verbally, what we're seeing here is someone who looks defeated and only starts sobbing when the interrogator tells her that this has become a homicide investigation. Otherwise, if you were to mute this video and watch her nonverbal communication here, you would be led to believe that perhaps she had been told that she needed to change her radiator and that was going to be an extra expense, and she felt defeated because of that reason. This is not the nonverbal communication of someone who has lost their child, but I feel that's very obvious. Let's go into detail about why that is. She is slumped down. Her hands are tucked underneath her legs. This is all indication of feeling defeated, more that she has been told bad news. Not horrific news, not very traumatic news, and indications of defeat in this cluster here. Her looking sorrowful, her chin down, the slumping over, the hands tucked under her legs here, and very closed-off behavior is not the level of distress we would expect from a grieving mother, from someone who has lost her child. Now, it's possible that depression from losing a child can lead a mother to behave this way, but what we're seeing are all indications of defeat more than sorrow. And the sorrow comes after the interrogator states that this is a homicide investigation, which does not right off the bat mean that she is responsible in any manner. The fact that it becomes a homicide investigation can be defeating, sorrowful news for a mother, and for someone who is depressed, they may not behave the way that we would expect them to behave. So all of those are possibilities, but we would very much expect to see a mother more in distress, more willing to cooperate and be part of the investigation, someone who is deeply grieving and looks more exhausted than defeated about the situation.
It's the best thing that can happen. On the chance that we are 100% correct and she has passed away, finding her now versus later will bring closure to your family, will bring closer to everybody, regardless of how it happened or why it happened. Meaning, if you have an inclination, if you know where she's at, if his father knows, that doesn't mean those people get held accountable for what he did. It doesn't mean those people get held accountable for knowing what he did. It means we close out the investigation. You know what I mean? So a lot of times we go into
Her feet are very still and closed until he brings up if she knows who could have been the person who ended Madeline Soto's life, then she should speak up, cooperate. They could close the investigation, everything would go more smoothly. Suddenly her feet move a little bit, some indications of discomfort there. That's an adapter. This quick, repetitive movement there. Though normally adapters would come more repeatedly over time, and we are going to see it here and there pop up. But indications of nervousness around that, along with the lip compressions, the holding back of feelings or thoughts usually, or emotion of some sort. But again, this is not the nonverbal communication of someone who has lost their child, who would love to participate in this interrogation and find out who did it. We're not seeing anger and the nervousness appearing around the interrogator mentioning she could tell him who did it if she knows, or who might have done it. That brief veering away from baseline behavior there says that something's going on there, that she might perhaps know exactly who did it. And of course, everybody does know, based on recent events, that Stephen, her, I believe, boyfriend at the time, did confess to killing Madeline Soto. But if you did not know that, that brief appearance of movements, that veering away from the baseline there, very much indicates something else is going on, that she may very well know who did this.
rooms like this, when you ask people questions, they say, hey, do you know what happened? Do you know what happened? And there's this fear of what happened already happened. I can't change that, so I'm not going to insert myself with knowledge because it's going to make me look bad. Regardless, at this point, murder, right? He victimized her. He ruined her entire life from childhood until now. I think that there's probably some sense of guilt. And my fear is that sense of guilt is causing you to not want to assist in the location of her, not because you're a bad person.
So then we see a very small head nod as he says, your boyfriend did this, didn't he? And she's cooperating with that brief head shake. She very much knows. Now she's confirmed that she knows he did it. And then the tears come as the interrogator says, so perhaps there's guilt that basically you have allowed this to happen to your daughter. The tears again not coming around the fact that her daughter's dead. There's no distress around that. It seems, it appears to be more around her guilt, her participation in this, and what she knows. Now when the interrogator states what happened has happened, non-verbally she's fully slumping over, her head droops that direction, and she is very much defeated at that point, realizing yes, that's true, what has taken place has definitely taken place, and there's this level of acceptance that needs to be met because there's literally nothing else that can be done. And you see that moment of defeat, but again, not distress and grief where we should see it.
Personal. But because there's that sense of guilt that what was happening under your roof, and now by her being found brings that all to your plate, and it doesn't.
Oh no, if I knew anything, I would so tell you I love him. Even if she said, you guys tell me your suspicions, but I'm not going to believe it until I have her body.
So there are things, and the reason I say these things, and again, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but the reason I say these things is that a lot of things you said, and a lot of things I've kind of researched between Fox 35 story, between your initial statement to the police, a lot of things have changed. The initial statement to the police was you watched her get dressed, you watched her leave, you knew exactly what she was wearing.
Can I tell you my thought process or where I came from with that?
A lot of times there are indications of no remorse in instances of someone being guilty, but sometimes the person feels sorrowful and it's still not remorse. And that's very much what we're seeing here. We're seeing real tears, but it comes around her guilt and her participation in this, her perhaps being charged with something and her fear around that and her defeat around that, not necessarily around her daughter being gone. And then there's that distancing language there. Until I have the body, not my daughter, my baby, my child, nothing of the sort, does not name Madeline herself. So there's that distancing there that I would not expect to see when it comes to a mother and a daughter that should have been otherwise bonded and connected. But of course, no bonded and connected mother would have allowed this sort of thing to happen where Stefan was in bed with her daughter and should never have been. And there's parts of this interrogation where it's mentioned that other house guests did not want to share a bathroom with Stefan, with a male She does not state that her daughter perhaps would feel uncomfortable sharing a bed with Stefan, or that matters in any capacity. Just that the house guests were worth more respect at that point than her own daughter. And the type of person that would do that, of course, is more concerned with herself and her own guilt. Very self-centered, usually.
I was handed this form, and I'm like, where do I start? What do I write? And somebody said, tell them what you saw. And so I started with I saw. And then I wrote out what I wrote out. But it wasn't until later I was like, wait, I didn't see her. I assumed that I saw her. I assumed that I heard her. But I didn't. In reality, I didn't see her. I only saw him. And I heard something in the kitchen, but I don't know who that was.
Which we talk about today. But I guess there's other concerns. Right? You were nervous. The police have showed you their hand.
Now we no longer see the defeated, slumped over behavior that we saw earlier. We see her upright, chin up. She's making sure that what she's saying really lands with this interrogator. She's more focused on the reaction and behaviors of the interrogator than on the truth of her story. Then when she says, I might have seen someone in the kitchen, but I don't know who that is, there's an asymmetrical shoulder shrug. It's not natural. Normally, if we confidently are uncertain of something, all of our features uplift in uncertainty. I don't know. I have nothing to offer you, basically. But we're not seeing that there. We're seeing an asymmetrical shoulder shrug, and she even puts some distance between herself and this interrogator briefly for a moment there. It's very closed off behavior, very defensive, not uncertain.
Stephanie, walk your phone. Stephanie, we want to talk to you. You're going to lock down your residence. You can't go back inside. Me? I don't care if it's the love of my life sitting next to me. I don't care if it's maternal grandma. If the police come and take my mom's phone and my son's disappearance, I'm not going to offer my mom a lawyer. That's nuts to me. That to me shows you prioritizing stuff. Because at that point, you became more worried about him being falsely accused than any. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Blurt it out, that's what you felt. Does that make sense? People having lawyers is their constitutional right. That is
we do see the brief indicators of discomfort. Again, those subtle feet movements there when he brings up that she perhaps prioritizes her boyfriend over the fact that her child's missing. The interrogator is having to guide her and tell her, I don't care who it is if my child is gone and someone I know is being interrogated, I'm not going to stand in the way and prioritize because they may have done it. And we saw that brief subconscious head shake there in agreement with the idea that Stefan has ended Madeline's life. She has basically told this interrogator, yes, he did it, I know he did it. Again, not a large movement that would take more effort, that would be more conscious. It was very subtle. This indicates either she's willing to throw Stefan under the bus, but verbally she's not expressing that. We're not hearing her say, yes, definitely Stefan did it, I know he did it, definitely it was him, which in itself could have indicated a level of guilt, as she would be throwing someone else under the bus when she has participated in him being a large part of Madeline's life. Sleeping in a bed, she admits she allowed them to sleep in a bed together, which is not appropriate for a teenager or minor to be in a bed with a grown adult man without the mother present, or really at all. It's not very appropriate. And Madeline was most likely very uncomfortable, and Stefan even has recently admitted to doing very wildly inappropriate, horrific things to Madeline. And the mother verbally expresses that Stefan is not a bad person, that he had all the reason in the world to behave the way that he did.
Thing that everybody is afforded. But for somebody who's going through what you were going through, to offer him a lawyer leads me to believe that there may have been a conversation, there may have been knowledge, or there may have been some information that you have, whether it be his involvement, her location, or something to where in your mind there's guilt.
I promise you, wait.
Because you offering him a lawyer is very weird.
I know. That was still me under the assumption that I think at one point you guys interviewed me, and when you guys showed me the picture of her, I believed the stuff, but I didn't want to believe that he had done anything equal to her. I'm like, what if he did this stuff fine, but what if she's still missing out there? What if somebody took her? I still wanted to believe I believed him. I believed his whole story. So I was just like, I kept repeating that.
If you pay attention to her hands very closely, you see a lot going on that is very telling. If you did not pay attention to any of the clusters of behavior, her chin going down, her going from still and her baseline being focused on this interrogator to subtle movements here and there that are very brief, her hands alone are very telling. And hidden thumbs, closed off, tightened, clasped hands, all of that indicates hiding something, or at least discomfort around something. And that's very much what we see here. We see her go from sitting with her hands clasped, all closed, a barrier there, to illustrating what took place, perhaps a time frame that she's trying to illustrate here. And verbally she's expressing, I believe, but when she says, I believed, her thumbs go away, her hands go away, it goes over here. She's hiding and closing off, and she even situates herself where she pushes herself back and puts that distance between herself and this interrogator. All behaviors of someone who knows more, is guilty, very much does not believe or did not believe that Stefan was innocent. And the interrogator is saying, it's bizarre that you offered this person a lawyer when you know or you don't know that he did it. You're not sure. And she's saying, well, I believed he didn't do it. But then everything closes off and her hands are going away and closed off, her thumbs disappear. She's very much hiding something there. Again, if we didn't know based on recent trials and events that have taken place that he was guilty, non-verbally she has expressed that multiple times in this very interrogation. With the subtle head shake, the nervousness around the interrogator bringing up that perhaps she knows something more than what she's saying, and her feet briefly move there. And then this where her thumbs go away when she says, I believed he wasn't guilty. But then why would she need to get him a lawyer of any kind? Why would he need that defense? That does not in itself always mean someone's guilty. People need lawyers. I would say even if you're innocent, of course, get a lawyer. But the cluster there of behaviors, non-verbally and based on her actions of getting a lawyer in the first place, all of that combined point to guilt and her very much knowing what was taking place. And then, of course, we know by now that she didn't even attend the trial, where she should have very much been there, very much condemning Stefan. And we did not see that, and that's what we expect of a mother, at least a good mother, who very much genuinely cares for her daughter Madeline, who is gone now. Today, I'm analyzing the body language of Alex Murdaugh, who was an influential man in South Carolina and ended the lives of his wife Maggie and his son Paul. He was also charged on 22 counts of financial crimes. He was stealing from his clients, and that earned him 40 extra years on top of 2 life sentences. So it's safe to say he will never get out, but let's analyze this body language. This particular video comes from a channel called Law and Crime Network, so please go check them out. I will leave the full video in the description link. Let's get started.
Came back here. I mean, I pulled up and I could see him, and, you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. And my boy over there, I could see it was...
I'll start off by saying I believe all 4 of them are sitting in a car in the perhaps driveway or yard of where this crime took place. And we start off seeing that Alex is not actually making eye contact clearly with anybody asking him questions. Though they are in a car, so position-wise, that could be why. But the fact that his eyes are sideways, shifting very briefly and very subtly towards the man asking him questions, trying to get more information, is very unnatural. He doesn't want to directly confront the man asking him questions. Now, when we're emotional, when we're truly in distress, we will withdraw socially. So sometimes it could be a case of someone being in true distress, but the fact that his blink rate is very normal, the fact that it almost looks as if he's smiling in some points in this, there are certainly no real tears, no glabella furrowing there in between the eyebrows, no grief muscles, no emphasis on anything, no indications of shock, all these things that we should see. Verbally, what he's expressing is that he sees this man, he knows it was bad in his mind, but he doesn't go after this person. He doesn't even go after this person after he discovers his wife and son are dead. That is a bit alarming to me because after discovering his wife and son are dead, he makes no attempt to go after who might have done it. And just body language wise, non-verbally, he's not expressing that he's truly in distress. What we're seeing here when he starts to pretend to cry, his head goes down. He's protecting that vulnerable part of his body, which we would typically do if we were in distress. but he's really having to work hard, put in a lot of effort to scrunch up his face. There's not a real authentic contraction of muscles around the orbicularis, and there's still some aversion, and he's very noisy. This isn't natural. This is most likely his attempts to make sure that whoever's asking him questions doesn't get any information out of him. Can't ask him questions, can't receive information. I believe that the man asking him questions knows this, as he doesn't reach out and comfort this man. He's in fact the only one that doesn't do so. He most likely knows something else took place.
And I ran over to Maggie. Actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to...
There's no sense of urgency or panic in his voice. This isn't a missing case, so it makes sense he's not very panicked because of someone being missing and him having to make sure they're found safely, but he should at least be panicked about the fact that his family's now dead. Someone else did this. He should be in some sort of shock. We're not seeing all of this. Instead, he appears to actually be laughing, but he covers his face. His face is very bright red, but there's no sniffling. There's nothing actually taking place here. Again, this is just noisy. This is emotional barriering. This is keeping people from getting information, which an innocent person would typically not have to do. Verbally, he also expresses he tried to turn over Maggie. Well, first it was his son, and then he figured it out. He doesn't elaborate on figured what out and what there was to figure out, and why he would reach for his son's phone instead of checking for a pulse. He doesn't note, I checked for a pulse, I checked to see if either of them were still alive, I ran after the guy, I called 911. Nothing that would instinctually happen in a case like this when someone has just been killed. That's just what we're seeing in this video. I'm sorry this one has been short. There's not a lot to this one, but this is what we can see so far for this man and what he's been charged with. And most likely he believed that his influence in the community could save him from this sort of thing. That didn't work out for him. Please let me know what you might know about this case and leave your thoughts in the comment section.
Catch him sleeping, right? I have seen him pass out in all sorts of places, yes.
And you also captured a video of Mr. Depp in the kitchen that was played again for this jury today, beating up some cabinets. Do you recall that?
Sorry, say that again?
You recall capturing Mr. Depp in the kitchen of one of his homes, beating up some cabinets?
Yes. Slamming things around, yes.
So you took that video of Mr. Depp in the kitchen, right?
I did.
And you took it on one of your iPad devices?
I took it on my iPad.
You were deposed in August of 2016 in connection with your divorce proceedings from Mr. Depp, right?
That is correct.
And you will recall that the video of Mr. Depp in the kitchen was released online the day before your deposition in August of 2016, don't you?
That's correct.
You're the one who released that video.
Incorrect.
Isn't that true?
That's incorrect. I flew in from another place at the time. I remember learning about it when I landed.
So here we have the cross-examination of Amber Heard during the Johnny Depp trial, which most of you probably already know what took place. In this particular clip, though, while verbally Amber Heard is expressing that she is in disagreement, that what took place where this video is released by her specifically is incorrect, the disagreement I want you to focus on is actually her disagreement with herself, also known as her being basically deceptive, most likely, where her nose wrinkles up, a bit in disgust there, her palpable fissures there around her eyes are narrowed, and then there's a lot of eye shuddering all of a sudden, whereas prior to this she was able to just say correct, incorrect. She would turn to the jury when she said these words to make sure that they were reacting, that they heard her, that they acknowledged what she was saying. But then during this particular part where she says incorrect, suddenly you get eye fluttering, her blinking very rapidly, her flipping through in her mind what took place, what she's going to say, and is generally in disagreement with her own words of this being an incorrect idea.
Even if I wanted to do something like that, that's not who I am.
Then what happened?
I can't tell you. How do you expect me to tell you? You want me to make up a story and
No, the truth. The truth is simple. You don't have to make that up. You just go back and tell me the truth. You can't tell me that this event
has not been weighing on you for...
Now here we have Richard Allen during the Delphi murders interrogation. Again, verbally he's expressing he does not agree with what the interrogator is saying. So it seems obvious this man disagrees. But non-verbally, let's look at what exactly he's disagreeing with, because again, it seems to be more with his own ideas, with himself, with what he's saying. In general though, if you are in a situation where someone's saying, I don't know what to tell you, and their body language goes from open to very closed, his hands, in this case, go over his abdomen. We have abdomen blocking, which is usually in defense, usually in disagreement, usually closed off and not open to ideas, to what's being said, to the situation in front of us. In this interrogation video, Richard's not open to the idea that the truth's not actually out there, that he told anything other than the truth, which is possible in his case because I have read that he has been diagnosed with psychosis and things that would make him believe or might make him believe that he actually was not guilty, and then later on maybe remembered that he was, remembered what actually happened, or any possibility there surrounding psychosis. So I don't want to go into that, but as far as non-verbally, him being in disagreement, he closes off, his head goes down, he is protecting that vulnerable part of his body. So there's a bit of shame in not wanting to face what's being said, some aversion there. And he just goes from, I don't know, and open nonverbal cues to very closed off, and usually someone's shoulders will go in, they'll do abdominal blocking, he has his foot in front of him. Now he had his foot in front of him, his leg crossed over one knee this entire time, so that particular bit does not mean anything, but is part of a cluster at this particular moment of closed off behaviors and not being open to what he's saying, not being the truth not being out there, and again, this entire situation. Today I'm doing an analysis on Zachary Hughes, who ended the life of a vet tech named Christina Parcell, who was the ex-wife of a friend of Zachary's, and it gets pretty complicated. Let's get into it.
Metrics that were used by OCS personnel to evaluate physical fitness.
Yes.
Describe to the jury what those metrics were.
There's something called the PFT, the physical fitness test, and it consists of 3 areas. It's pull-ups.
A few things I want to note right off the bat are that Zachary Hughes is a pianist, was a pianist, and he was also in the military, and he is very artistic. There is a point that he briefly mentions that he worked with students, so you can very much tell through his demeanor that he believes himself to be a teacher and an artist, in both the ways that he very arrogantly speaks to everybody in this courtroom, to everybody involved, as if he's a teacher talking to students and talking down to them. It's very telling of how he might have treated the students he might have worked with. He also is artistic in the ways that he story tells. The way he turns towards the jury to answer some questions and launches into this artistic painting the scene of what took place is not only because of his love for art, his interest in being an artist of some sort, but also because at one point he realized that speaking in a low voice, confirmation glances towards the jury, the eyebrows furrowed and the forehead creasing would make him seem reasonable, stable, not aggressive, and he would come off as charming and charismatic.
Failure, maximum crunches under 2 minutes, and a 3-mile timed run.
Well, what's a perfect score on that?
You can get a maximum of 100 in each of the 3 areas, so a perfect score would be 300.
What was your score?
294.
Ultimately, were you able to complete officer candidate school?
No, I was not.
Why were you not able to complete officer candidate school?
I was dropped.
So occasionally you will see him say yes or no, and then in other instances, he'll elaborate more, in which he will turn towards the jury. There, you will see those forehead creases, the grief muscles, and a lot of expression as he sets the scene for something that may make him look good in this case.
After the 3rd week of officer candidate school, due to level 3 stress fractures in both of my tibias.
So you had broken legs?
More or less.
At the time you were forced to leave officer candidate school, what percentage of the class were you in?
He also has that physical barrier with his arm, but he's sat straight up. He's confident. He's not defending that vulnerable part of his body, and he has no blink rate as he fixates on the attorney and what he's being asked. This is another display of potential arrogance. He is not just confident. He seems to put himself physically above others and has this bit of seeming disdain for others in this courtroom, hence that need for that physical barrier in between himself and who is asking him these questions, because he perhaps thinks he is above this man asking him questions. And you will see the confirmation of this later on.
I was in the top 3%.
Do you remember how many members were in your OCS class at this time?
It was more than 400.
When you left OCS, how did you leave it with the Marine Corps?
The CEO of Quantico, which is where Marine Corps OCS is at, asked me to return. He essentially told me to go home, heal, retrain, and come back.
Zachary once again turns towards the jury and has those forehead creases and the grief muscles as he is elaborating on the decision he made. He was told to heal and retrain, and he's answering the man in front of him by turning to the jury and elaborating it. He's real short in his answers when he is just addressing the man in front of him, again, putting himself above this man who's asking him these questions that he's not comfortable with. And then in other instances, again, he's setting the scene, he's being artistic, and he's trying to appeal to the jury who will ultimately have a hand in his verdict.
What instrument did you use to conduct performances outside?
I saved up some money and bought what was the best electronic keyboard on the market at the time. And I needed something portable, and I also wanted something that would do justice to the pieces I was trying to play. So it was a Roland DeVie piano.
Now we have jumped a bit to a part where he's discussing in particular his performances and his work. He very briefly states that he worked outside. He's very short with his response there. But again, then when it comes to the kind of instrument he played, he launches into storytelling mode where he's trying to appeal to the jury about this particular instrument. But the story he tells is not just that he bought this instrument, it's that he worked a few extra jobs. So he's this hard worker, and he's trying to emphasize that with the creases in his forehead and appealing again to the jury, looking directly at them instead of continuing to face the man who asked him the question in the first place, who he seems to physically feel superior to. In fact, when he answers questions, he physically lowers his head into the microphone. Now, this really could just be because of the position of the microphone being lower in comparison to him, but he does not adjust himself or the microphone to fix this issue, and instead lowers his head as if he's having to lower himself to the level of the man in front of him. Whereas when it comes to the jury, he doesn't do that as much. And it goes again into storytelling mode where he's painting this picture of being the stable, hard worker of a long time who people admired, and he is a great guy. He's putting himself in this setting of being somewhat of a great person, a well-liked person, and again, appealing to the jury there.
Where did you, or how did you get the money to pay for the piano?
Started working with my dad.
So after you got the piano, did you begin to play music on the streets of downtown Greenville?
Yes, I applied for a performance permit for public spaces, and then I started several times a week taking my keyboard downtown and playing these sonatas at various spots in downtown Greenville.
He knows what questions are about to come up, what he's going to have to address, and that's a bit uncomfortable to him. But you continue to see as he looks towards the jury, the forehead creases, the furrowing of the brows, and he tells the story of someone who got this permit to paint himself as perhaps this law-abiding citizen, someone who wouldn't typically do something out of the boundaries of the rules.
When did you start performing in downtown Greenville?
It would have been sometime in the summer of 2020.
Where were some of your most frequent locations where you perform music in downtown Greenville?
Probably the most frequent was right in front of Spill the Beans at the entrance to Paul's Park, where the fountain is.
Occasionally, you will also see him purse his lips. It's not lip compressions. He's pursing his lips. He's expressing frustration at some of these questions being asked, as if perhaps they're either irrelevant to him, to the story, or it could be that he, again, knows what's about to have to be addressed here.
I want to talk about an evening in August of 2020 while you were performing outside Spill the Beans. While you were performing, did anyone made contact with you and introduced himself to you.
Yes.
Who was that?
That was John Mello.
So now he's having to directly address how he met John Mello, the man who is his friend who was actually in a relationship at one point with Christina, the vet tech that Zachary here has ended the life of. So he's having to bring this up. When the date of August comes up, you see that tongue jut, and you also see the barriering, but it's a loose fist. He's not aggressive about this. He's not feeling angry or tense, but this is a pretty relaxed position, still barriering at the same time, putting a physical distance between himself and the man asking him questions. You see that tongue jut when August is brought up, and then the story about meeting John Mello. But in some instances here, you will also see him physically nod yes with just his eyes. And so he'll eye block, but it's not an eye block to keep things out. It's to very arrogantly say yes without fully acknowledging the man in front of him, because he's most likely trying to make this man in front of him feel, again, beneath Zachary and not on his level. Hence the whole reason they're having to have this court and all these questions that Zachary is frustrated by and impatient by. He seems to feel this is a waste of time based on pursing his lips at moments, keeping it brief, and then what looks like eye blocking, that's him physically acknowledging the question and at the same time putting himself superior to the man in front of him, saying yes with just his eyelids. He does not do this to the jury because, again, he's trying to appeal to the jury, and they are what he seems to feel is a bigger part of how this all plays out for him.
Was John Mello by himself, or was anyone with her?
He was with his daughter, Aida Mello.
How old, best you can recall, how old was Aida at the time?
She was 8.
Tell this jury.
You see a lot of grief muscle, but no forehead creases and no blink rate when he starts to talk about Aida, this girl that he allegedly was just trying to save the life of, which is what he will say later on in his testimony, that he was just doing this to save this little girl from it. And it really didn't have anything to do with either John or Christina, except that Christina is this terrible person, allegedly. And you'll see all of that. But in this particular instance, again, the things that really might help him in his case, he appeals to the jury for. He turns to them and he says 8, answering the age of the girl, Aida. And this is perhaps manipulation on his part to try to get the jury to recognize that this was just a little girl. However, he continues to keep answers brief and be terse with the man in front of him, to be arrogant towards the man in front of him, except for that significance around Aida and that one eyebrow raise, as he emphasizes, which is interestingly also asymmetrical, though I did not see any other indications of potential deception, and the girl's name is in fact Aida.
About the interaction you had with John Mello when he first introduced himself when you were front spilled beans.
I didn't know who he was, but he came up and said he was a musician and asked if I'd be willing to take a request. He said his daughter's favorite piece was Claire de Lune, and I know that piece really well. It's a favorite piece of mine, so I played it for her.
What, if anything, did you...
So he adds a lot of detail in this that isn't necessarily what he was asked. He was asked how he met John Mello, in which he again turns to appeal to the jury and starts telling the story about this man who just loved his daughter so much. He brings his daughter's request into the picture to further emphasize that this was all for allegedly this little girl. Language of Sherry Papini in her interview with Annie Elise. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my pleasure. So in your recent docuseries, you discussed the 2016 abduction. And what was once said was a hoax, you say was not a hoax. It actually did happen. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, I think that the primary objective for me is to be able to tell my side of the story. And my federal charge is for lying to a federal officer. It is not for faking a kidnapping. And it's really important to understand that while there's narratives spinning out there that I've changed the story, I've never changed the story other than the identity.
So this is where eyebrow flashes really mean a lot, because right now we have Sherry doing what's called the romancer. She's very focused on Annie. There's prolonged focus on Annie, no real blink rate. This is called the romancer because it really builds rapport. It's a connection to the other person that in some cases would allow for no space to disagree. So normally if someone is making prolonged eye contact, they come off as very believable because people are under the impression that if you break eye contact, you are lying, which is not true. So this prolonged eye contact really establishes a connection with the other person and also comes off as believable. So I see this throughout this interview with Sherry Papini, as she wants to be believed, of course, and she also wants to really connect with this interviewer. And Annie here might be less likely to disagree or really question Sherry if there's that connection there. So it just leaves less room for disagreement and for any kind of questioning. And at the same time, Sherry's breathing is a bit labored, indicates a bit of perhaps anxiety or discomfort that you don't see elsewhere in her body. Her hands are not moving, which is another thing. There are no illustrators, which are movements of your hand in relation to what you're saying, an emphasis of what you're saying, and we don't see any of that here. Instead, she's just focused on Annie. Another thing I will say about the romancer here is that prolonged eye contact with someone gives someone the idea that they are the only focus, that they are significant to this other person, and again, it just builds a connection and rapport with the other person because that person may feel important. This works especially in cases where the other person might have low self-esteem, which I don't believe is the case with Annie here, but there's a possibility of that with anybody, and people such as Sherry Papini will take advantage of that.
Of the person that held me captive. I've always maintained that I was held against my will and tortured. The details of that have never changed. I was just too afraid to come out with the identity of the person that held me captive.
So can you walk me through that day from your perspective, right when you first went out to go for the run?
So on November 2nd in 2016, I had made arrangements with my ex-boyfriend, the one that I had been secretly having an emotional affair with. It was getting to a point where things were getting a lot more serious and I wanted to end the relationship. He wanted to do that in person. He wanted to continue talking. So he said that he wanted to come out into town. And
Sherry's also very particular with her words when she distances herself from what's taking place and when she takes direct ownership. In this case, you see some indications of that, but it's not as much as we will see later on in this interview. So here she says the details haven't changed. And then when she says that she was afraid, there's an asymmetrical shoulder shrug and some eye blocking, a prolonged blink there, closing of the eyes. There's some aversion to being afraid. Perhaps she does not want to be seen as weak. This is just one clue that she might want to maintain this idea of some amount of control in this situation. And you'll generally see that with people who have personality disorders such as antisocial personality disorder, which I don't believe Sherry Papini has, although there are some clues there. I'm not a licensed psychologist, but typically you will see this more with sociopaths. Again, I don't think that Sherry is one, but I can't diagnose her. And you see this aversion to the word afraid, even though she wants Annie to believe that she was afraid in this situation, that James was a bad guy. Now, for those of you who don't know James, the ex-boyfriend that she left with, that she pretended had taken off with her and she left her kids. Prior to that, she allegedly was this wonderful mom and she would never do such a thing. So it was really frightening to her friends and family what took place. And then it turns out in 2016, she had lied about the entire thing. She had pinned this narrative on two women, and there is an element of racism that I don't want to go into, but it was found that she had lied about the entire thing, that two women had not did her, that she had left with her then ex-boyfriend James, and now she is trying to spin the narrative into it being James's fault. James not her husband, James her ex-boyfriend who she left with, and then she committed mail fraud, which is essentially what did land her in prison for, I believe, about 18 months from what I've read. And now the narrative is that she had no clue what was going on and James was the one that took off with her. This was not the plan. And we're going to see throughout this that there's no illustrators, no emphasis in any of this. The eyebrow flashes are very particular. She emphasizes things with her eyebrows at specific points, which is important to note because that's when she might be actually telling the truth as opposed to when she's lying. Because a lot of this, she is being deceptive. I will say allegedly, but there are a lot of indications of deception throughout all of this. Her lack of emphasis around things in particular, her lack of forehead creasing and eyebrow flashing, I always say, but also other indications, her having to romance chance and really build this connection with Annie that people who are being honest don't typically have to do. And it can be a sign that someone's trying to take advantage of you. In this case, a sign that Sherry's trying to take advantage of Annie here.
Meet me in town. Things did not go according to plan. We were supposed to meet up in town with a friend present, and he ended up being at the end of my dirt road.
Did he know you were going for a run that morning?
Yeah. He had been frantically texting me all morning. The energy of it was super unusual. It went from just our casual texting to this very intense, pushy, aggressive text messaging. And in fact, I was really scared. It really concerned me. So I was trying to get my husband to come home and luring him in any way that I could to come home. And he didn't. He blew me off. And I was trying to avoid.
Position-wise, her story also doesn't make sense. Verbally, it doesn't make sense that she states James and herself were getting more serious, so she wanted to end things. He wanted to end things in person, so she agrees to this. There was supposed to be someone else there, and then it was just him at the end of the driveway. But she does not take direct ownership of any of this. She does not say, and then I was surprised he was at the end of the driveway because I did not tell him to do so. She says, and then he was at the end of the driveway. And there's this passing of time that she leaves out where other things took place. Perhaps they did agree at that point to meet at the end of her driveway. She notes that she was scared. She tells a story of being afraid of her ex-boyfriend showing up at the end of the driveway, and then she tells Annie that she was trying to call her husband, her now ex-husband, and tell him to come home. The idea around this is that she was so scared he had to come home and protect her, though in a moment here she's going to tell us she walked out to the car, which she would not do. She was afraid. She would not do if there had been some serious conversation with her ex-boyfriend James. Now there could be an element of curiosity as to why he did pull up, but she would not be then calling her husband to get him to come back, knowing that she had had this affair with her ex-boyfriend. So position-wise, verbally, it doesn't make sense, but non-verbally, what we're seeing here is downward glabella furrowing. It's more anger or disbelief than emphasis of something. Normally the glabella should be furrowed upwards, and the glabella is that muscle there in between the eyebrows. I say that in every video. It's very important though, because it's very difficult to manipulate that. And when there's real grief around something, real fear, you will see that go upwards. When there's anger, aggression, disbelief, that will go downwards. And that can indicate some deception here, as it's not in line with what she's expressing verbally. So there's a lack of emphasis, and there's a lack of real grief, a lack of real indications of fear. She even smiles as she says that she was trying to lure her husband back to potentially protect her, although she does not state to protect her. And again, there's this passing of time she does not verbally note here, where she says, and then this took place, and then this took place. What happens between that and this taking place, we'll never know.
Seeing him because he was so agitated. And there he was at the end of the dirt road, because we'd been talking, so he knew my entire route. He knew where I was going to be and what I was doing.
And what was it like when his car approached you? What happened? What did he say to you? Did he just get out? Did he shuffle you into the car? What happened?
I was really scared. It was alarming, when he pulled up, because it wasn't the plan. We were supposed to meet into town. And when you think about, you're a female. When you think about seeing another man, you wouldn't be in jogging attire, no makeup, and, a sports bra. You would get yourself ready, and there would be a process to that. And it was terrifying. He wasn't supposed to be there. That's not what we had planned. In terms of getting in the vehicle, this is where my case gets really complicated.
This is what I mean by her being particular with her words, and this distancing, this lack of direct ownership over certain events. She continues to try to build this rapport, this connection with Annie, but she uses this language that's very particular. She says, you wouldn't wear sweat, making this narrative about how unusual it would be for her to go meet an ex-boyfriend, wanting a date with him or anything intimate with him, and wearing something that women typically wouldn't wear to meet someone that they are trying to impress or to fall in love with or to continue some relationship with. So that's her narrative here, but she does not, again, take direct ownership verbally over this. She says, you're a girl, you wouldn't do this, and she pins this back on Annie or someone else. women wouldn't do this. You're a woman, you would know. And this building of this connection, this false connection here, that again is more typical of a sociopath. People with narcissistic personality disorder also do this, and I do believe she does have that. But again, I cannot diagnose her. And she could be a narcissistic sociopath. There can be some crossover there that I can see, but so far it just looks like narcissism. Aside from that, verbally she's expressing, you would do this, everyone else would do this. She's normalizing what people would do and doesn't say that she did this. This is what she texted him, that this is what she wanted. And at the end there, that romancer comes back out, that prolonged eye contact, complete lack of blink rate there, as she then says, this is what James did. And then she actually says what James did. And it's not really in line with her narrative about how she was afraid. And then she went out to meet him.
Have you watched the docuseries? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you hear a lot of people say it's reasonable to conclude that she got in the car. And that's true. It's reasonable to say that I would have gotten in the car, but there's no memory of that. It's also reasonable to say that I would have refused to get in the car. I have no memory of that. The only person that holds that piece is James. And, you know, he has an objective to not implicate himself as well. So it's highly unlikely we're ever going to get the truth of the story. But I have no memory of that. I remember getting up to the end of the dirt road and the phone dropping, and that's it.
When did your memory then pick up again? Because it's a pretty long car ride from Northern California down here to Orange County.
Absolutely. I've never done drugs. I've never even been drunk before.
Again, being more particular with her words, the way she answers questions is very roundabout. It's not direct. It's not, yes, this is what happened, this is what I did. And this is very typical of someone who's being deceptive. There's no emphasis around these parts as well. There's emphasis around her saying, it's reasonable to say that I would have got in a car, because it very much is reasonable for someone to assume that she may or may not have. But when she says, it's reasonable to assume I got in the car, the glabella furrowing again is downwards, not in line non-verbally with what she's expressing. And then the emphasis is, well, it would also be reasonable for me to get in the car. This does not mean that she's telling the truth in that part, that she didn't get in the car, that she did get in the car. It's just expressing what she knows could be believable. So there's some emphasis around, well, that could be believable, not necessarily that this took place. And again, this is why the eyebrow flashing and the forehead creasing is important, and the glabella furrowing in the direction of the glabella furrowing is important, because it has to be in line with what she's expressing verbally for it to be most likely honest. And instead we see emphasis around parts that are separate from her, detached from her, that she's not taking direct ownership of. We don't hear her say, I got in the car, or I didn't get in the car. She says it would be believable for me to have got in the car or not got in the car. Her narrative around this, of course, is that James perhaps influenced her in some way, which again, position-wise does not make sense, because she states that she had been texting James. He then appears at the end of her driveway. That wasn't the plan, allegedly. She says that she tried to lure her husband back home. She does not say that it's to protect her, but that is what she's leading Annie and others to believe. She says she lured her husband. He didn't arrive. Suddenly she's under the influence and she felt as if something had taken place. She does not, though, verbally express that she'd taken a drink or anything from James, which, had she been afraid and had to lure her husband there to protect her, she would not have accepted anything from him, as he might be a danger to her. So verbally and non-verbally, it is all a jumble because she is being deceptive.
And the feeling that I had was completely out of body. Like, I felt very high. And so I woke up sporadically in the back of the car.
You were in the back seat of the car?
Back seat.
Was it a sedan, van?
I really don't remember.
Okay.
Woke up in the back sporadically. I was nauseous. It was really hard to keep my eyes open. And the next thing I knew, I was in Southern California and it was dark. So it was very clear that time had passed, and then I was in Southern California.
How long would you say that state of mind lasted, of going in and out and feeling like perhaps you were drugged or under the influence of something?
It's hard to recall, but I probably woke up maybe once or twice in the backseat, just kind of blinking your eyes and trying to stay awake.
Were you fully alert when you then were taken into his house?
Then she says she woke up sporadically. Sporadically, meaning periodically in intervals. She wasn't there the entire time. When we're nervous, sometimes we say things that don't make sense. Sometimes we misspeak. But then she confirms this as she says, I woke up in the back seat once or twice. So she had been between the front seat and the back seat during this road trip she had taken with James, her ex. And this is not typical of someone who was afraid, who was under the influence. Now, in situations like this, sometimes we do things that really do not make sense to do. But looking at the likelihood of what should have happened or what could have happened, what she expresses is that she was in the backseat napping sporadically in sweatpants, pretty comfortable, not there for romance or a date of some sort, and that's what she's verbally expressing. Non-verbally, there's a lot of disbelief and disagreement in her face. The glabella furrowing downwards, her turtling a bit there. This all indicates a level of disagreement and discomfort around what she's verbally expressing, most likely because she is being deceptive. It veers away from her baseline, which is to romance, to build this rapport with Annie, and there's this lack of emphasis, these lack of illustrators with her hands there, and lack of eyebrow flashes and blink rate. But that pops up here and there, especially around her being under the influence. So that veering away from the baseline is pretty telling there, that this is most likely not what took place where she was under the influence. And again, verbally, she had not expressed that she had taken anything from James, just that she had walked out to the end of her driveway. Position-wise does not make sense and is not likely.
I would not say fully alert.
Okay.
It was the weirdest feeling. It was very strange. It was like my feet couldn't connect to the pavement. It was a very odd sensation. Again, I'd never done drugs before, and he had to put a hand underneath me to help me walk into the house even.
And when you guys walked into the house, where did he walk you to directly those first few moments?
Walked me into the house and sat me down on the couch.
And you say you dropped your phone. There's been a lot of conversation about how the headphones were placed, that they were so neatly stacked or coiled around, but you say you dropped it in a panic and it just happened to fall that way, correct?
Yes, and also, I mean, we're relying on where law enforcement took that photograph, but Keith found the phone before law enforcement showed up, so we really don't know if it was tampered with or if it was manipulated in any way. I can tell you my side of the story, which is that the phone dropped, and I remember the sensation of the hair. You know, when you pull hair from something, you know, you have hair, gets stuck in the gummies really easily. But in terms of how...
There's clear discomfort around whatever happened with this phone. Her tongue juts as this phone's brought up, some clear discomfort. That's typically what we would do when we feel discomfort around something. And then some eye blocking. Again, closing our eyes for an elongated period of time, usually to hold something in, to remember something, or to avoid something, an aversion to something, and perhaps discomfort. Then we finally see an illustrator. We see her say, I can only tell my story, and her emphasis on herself, and then her position-wise showing us the phone and how things felt. Now, if she had dropped her phone prior to getting in the vehicle, and perhaps because she was under the influence of something, then most likely she would not have remembered that feeling. Again, there's no direct ownership here. She says, you know, you have hair. And again, throwing this narrative back at Annie and it being Annie's story as opposed to her own, even though she verbally expressed this is her truth and her story. But we don't see that direct ownership really in most of this interview, where she says, I texted this, I did this, he did this is what I wanted, this is what he did instead. We don't see that. We see gaps in time, which can be congruent with trauma. It can be congruent with dissociation. What she expresses sounds like dissociation, but she doesn't take ownership of that. There's no real indication non-verbally that this really was about her. No emphasis in the eyebrows and the forehead creasing, nothing there. Most of this interview in line with what she's verbally expressing.
All the phone was placed. You're right, there's a lot of emphasis on it, and you're relying on a detail from me in a less than 2-second interaction while I'm already afraid, trying to recall a decade later. And also, we don't know if it was tampered with in any way, because Keith used the Find My iPhone app, and he found it prior to law enforcement coming to take photographs.
Do you think he would have any reason to tamper with it or make it appear manipulated or staged?
I don't think appearing manipulated or staged, no, but there's a possibility you could have touched it before it was photographed, sure.
Do you think that if he touched it?
So here she's saying, we don't know if it was tampered. This becomes a group effort to figure out if it was tampered, but there's a lot of discomfort on the phone that we don't see around James in particular. That had she been a victim of James, we should see around James in particular. And we might see a bit of that here, but it's more about what she's saying and not, again, James. There's no anger or aggression around James. There's some aggression that appears there as she says, you're relying on information from me. That was about 2 seconds. So now she's finally given us this solid time frame that she allegedly remembers, this very quick bit of time where something happened with this phone, and you see the tongue jut and the lip raise and the teeth baring, some level of aggression there around this phone and her being reliable information, which is pretty interesting because if this is her story and she is telling the truth and this is actually what took place, there shouldn't be aggression around that. There should be more aggression around James and James not sticking to this alleged plan.
And picked it up, that he would then put it right back down with the headphones neatly wrapped around. I'm just wondering what the inference is there.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis put on it. And so there's a lot of reliance on my testimony for it. And it's just a really difficult detail to recall. And also putting all of the information on me. Like, I don't believe that I was the last person to touch it.
Okay. So going back to when James walks you into the home, what is he saying to you in those moments? Is he communicating? Is he silent? What's happening? Because I would imagine you had a bunch of questions at that point.
I would like to say I had a bunch of questions, but I was mostly just frozen. I was terrified. I was not supposed to be there. That was not part of the deal. And where we had flirted here and there about like, it'd be great to come and see you, there was no plan.
So again, her discomfort continues to be around people relying on her for information and this phone. She then verbally expresses she doesn't believe she was the last person to touch it, making it seem as if there were multiple people more than just herself and James. So pinning this on James, but not expressing James did it or that she did it, just she doesn't believe she was the last person to touch the phone, which again is distancing language, detaching herself from what took place, not taking direct ownership, or even saying directly that it was James who touched the phone last, who may have manipulated things. And even earlier she states, I don't think it was manipulation, which is a bit in defense of James, which we would not expect to hear from her. But we also continue to see a lack of emphasis around things. She does have illustrators pop up here and there in reference to herself, but not when she is being relied on for information. There's some discomfort around that and some detachment. She doesn't want to be a reliable source of information, even though at the same time, non-verbally, she's trying to be believed by Annie here, by whoever is listening. She is making prolonged eye contact, and she's trying to be believable while saying that she's not believable verbally. So non-verbally and verbally, it's not congruent. Everything isn't in line with what she's saying, and we're not seeing emphasis where we should see emphasis. We're not seeing illustrators that aren't in reference to herself, that may emphasize the position of specific parts of the story, specific objects, the vehicle, or anything aside from the phone and herself, and some discomfort around the phone and herself being a reliable bit of information as she's trying to make Annie believe that she doesn't remember. But if she doesn't remember, it doesn't make sense for her to pin this entirely on James. And she makes a few points that are more in favor of James than against James. And there's no aggression there non-verbally around James, but instead around people relying on her for information and her testimony because it is her story, but she doesn't want people to do that.
So it was mostly just a frozen state of, oh my God, now I'm so far from home. I have no help. I don't feel well. I feel under the influence. What do I do? And James doesn't really say a whole lot. So there wasn't a lot of conversation. It was just a lot of scare. I was really scared.
Do you think that the reason he abducted you was because he thought that he was helping you, or because he wanted to be with you and he didn't want anybody else to get in the way of that?
I think probably a little bit of both.
And if he thought that you were consenting to that and that you wanted to be with him as well, or that you were leaving an abusive or dangerous situation, why do you feel that he would feel the need to put you under the influence or potentially drug you?
Good point. James has a really sick mind. He's a very sick-minded person. In my opinion, I think he struggles with quite a lot of mental illness.
Now, we haven't seen eye accessing a lot in this as well. Her trying to consider what took place, remember events, think about a time frame of any sort. We haven't seen any eye accessing, which would be her looking up or down if it's more an emotion. And we're not seeing any of that here. We see, again, her romancing Annie here, the prolonged eye contact, except for points that there's some aversion. Here we see a bit of eye accessing, but we also see emphasis around being far from home, being afraid, and perhaps her fear in this part wasn't necessarily in regards to James, as she does not express that. She does not emphasize her fear of James. She just expresses she was afraid, which is possible. If she had ran away to be with her ex-boyfriend and she was afraid of being caught, afraid of the consequences, afraid of the things she was going to have to do to get out of this position, to avoid getting caught in this affair, she might be afraid, and we see that emphasis there that we don't see in regards to James in particular. And then we see emphasis around her being far from home, which is true. She was definitely far from home, and you see the forehead creasing and the eyebrow raising there, and the glabella furrowing upwards. So all of that is most likely true, that she was afraid, that she was far from home, but that's not around James in particular. That's not around her being the victim, being under the influence, or anything we should see in those particular bits that we are now seeing when she's stating she was far from home.
In my opinion, when we look at the evidence, when we look at the behavior, when we look at the pattern of behavior, there's a there. And there's a really sick-minded person there. So it's difficult for me to try and surmise what he was thinking. I was just terrified of him at that point. From this part,
I also want to state real quick, there is an aversion when Annie here asks a good question. Did James believe he was saving you from a bad situation? And if so, why did he feel like he had to put you under the influence of something to manipulate the situation? Which is a really great question, because it's unlikely that he would have done that if there was some form of consent and he felt like he was being a savior of some sort and not someone. And there's some aversion there, of course. Eye blocking, her avoiding, as she says, good point. Her tone lowers there. She's not confident in saying that. There's no emphasis, uplifting of features. Good point. That's very true. No uncertainty there, just good point. And her eyes close. And then she says maybe a little bit of both, which does not make sense. Because again, if someone believes they are saving someone, they believe they have consent to do so. There's a lot of things that could happen that don't make sense, but it definitely does not make sense. And non-verbally, what she's expressing is not in line with what she's saying, which makes it more likely that she is being deceptive. Then there's a raising of her mouth, a narrowing of her palpable fissures there, which are around her eyes, which is more in disbelief and disagreement of what she's stating or what she's hearing, which in this point, it's what she's stating because she's speaking as she expresses this. And the narrowing of palpable fissures there, along with the raising of the mouth that's upwards this direction, along with turtling, is an aversion to this, isn't confident, and verbally she is referencing someone else, a group of people. When we look at the patterns of behavior, now I think this is what took place, this is my opinion. So what she states is, my opinion is, when we look at, and it becomes not about her, but her and other people that she is now putting into this story, which we would not typically have to do if we're telling the truth, and it is our story that we are telling in our opinion. We would take direct ownership of this. This makes it seem as if there is a group of support family, friends around her who have also seen patterns of behavior in her ex-boyfriend that would lead to an event such as this. And doing an analysis on the Corey Richens case, who ended her husband's life, Eric Richens. She has kids, and let's get into it.
I'm assigned to the investigations division. I was assigned to be the lead detective in this case in April of this year. This case is an active case and the investigation's ongoing.
Detective, what was the sheriff's office?
A few things I want you to notice right off the bat are that Corey, in the button up there and the white button up there, her shoulders are up, her breathing's a bit labored, she's laser focused on whoever's speaking, her blink rate is almost non-existent, so she's obviously very tense, which who wouldn't be in this kind of case, but there are things that change along the way here that we're going to point out.
First involvement in this case.
On March 4th, 2022, at 3:22 hours, Summit County Dispatch received a 911 call regarding an unresponsive male in the Francis area.
Have you listened to that 911 call?
Yes.
Who placed that call?
The defendant, Corey Richens.
Was a portion of the police and EMS response captured on police body camera video?
Yes, it was.
Have you reviewed that video?
Yes, I have.
On that video, what time does EMS pronounce Eric Richens dead?
03:58 hours on March 4th.
I'm pausing right here because this could be mistaken for contempt in some cases, that rising of the side of the face, but this is definitely someone who is smug about something. And this coming right as the cameras are panned at her and right as the time of Eric Richens' death is announced is obviously a bit odd and telling, obviously no grief. There's no creasing, no anything that indicates that she has any remorse or regret or sadness about the death of her husband. Just this smirk and this look of smugness on her face there. So very telling about the kind of person she is. Also, this is an author, someone who wrote a children's book telling kids how to deal with the grief and the loss of their father. Very interesting, again, given she's the one that ended Eric Richen's life.
What, if anything else, does EMS say about how long he had been dead?
One of the EMS personnel made the comment that he had been dead a while.
Did the field medical examiner's office conduct an autopsy of Mr. Richens?
Yes, they did.
Have you reviewed the medical examiner's autopsy report?
Yes.
And the toxicology report that's part of that?
Yes.
Her breathing goes back to being labored now, and you see her almost try to act upset there, but no tears, no creasing the forehead, nothing that indicates that she's actually grieving the loss of her husband. You also start to see her basically chewing on her words. All these mouth movements side to side. She wants to say something. There's a lip compression there, and then at one point, eye blocking, which is this elongated eye blink there when the toxicology report's being brought up, which can indicate that she's a bit afraid that that would happen, that there would be even more evidence that would be damning to her case.
What did the medical examiner identify as the cause of death?
Drug intoxication, with the specific drug being fentanyl.
I'm going to now ask you, Detective, some questions about someone with the initial CL. Do you know who I'm talking about when I say CL?
Yes, I do.
Who is CL?
Her eyes immediately go up as CL, her associate, is brought up. And you see more lip movement, more lip compression, lip licks. She does know the camera's on her. Some of that can be a bit of grooming behavior, someone wanting to look nice or look good. I think a lot of this is her wanting to focus a lot on how she's going to be viewed. And she has a lot of rapport with the community that you'll find out if you watch this a little further on. This is from someone named Chasing, and I'll leave the channel link below, but this is someone who obviously does care a bit about how she's viewed, especially given she has a lot of connections in this community, and anything negative towards her can be damning in this case. So you see lip licking, but you see lip compressions and a bit of chewing on her words, wanting to say something in her defense. And again, a clear indication that she's not grieving any of this. She's not remorseful. There's no indication of shame here. And now she seems to have a bit of contempt towards CL. She didn't seem to know prior to this, given how her eyes go up like that, almost in surprise and wanting to know, what about CL? She seems to have not known that CL had anything to do with this and might have ratted her out. And so it seems she's just now finding out this information.
In relation to the defendant?
CL is an associate of the defendant. She cleaned houses for the defendant's business, as well as her personal home at times.
Does CL have a criminal drug history?
Yes.
Is she under supervision in a different county, a county other than Summit County?
Yes, she is.
And is that in relation to certain drug charges?
Yes.
Does the
You'll also know some very, very slight head nods from Corey here, where she goes, confirming certain things. And this gets interesting in relation to specific things that are brought up. You'll see fentanyl being brought up, and she'll very slightly go, yes, that took place. So she's confirming. And that, in contrast with the chewing of the words, the mouth movement that you see there, and the upward and then downward glances, is very interesting, very telling about what's piquing her interest here, what she might really be guilty of here, and how this actually took place.
Program. Does the core program which she's in monitor treatment and testing, etc.?
Yes.
Do you know how CL is performing in that program?
Based on my interactions with CL, she is progressing through the stages of that program, and that her personal outlook on her recovery is optimistic.
Have you interviewed CL in connection with this case?
Yes.
Again, she's going like this, and then her head goes up at a specific moment when this person says that her progress in this drug recovery program seems to be optimistic. She seems a bit surprised that the word optimistic is brought up there, so that piques her interest. Again, this could be pretty damning or pretty helpful in relation to her case. And so she's keying in on certain words here.
Approximately how much time have you spent interviewing her?
Over the course of multiple interviews, several hours each, I would say upwards of 10 hours.
Was CL in custody when you interviewed her?
Yes, she was.
Was that interview captured on video and audio recording?
Yes.
What, if any, promises did you make regarding, or to CL regarding her cooperation with being interviewed?
CL was not made any specific promises, but at the outset of our interviews, we explained to her that her cooperation in our investigation would result in us working with the prosecutors that were responsible for the charges she was facing.
Did you express to CL the seriousness of this case as well?
Some of her looking down at certain points can be taken as her not wanting to really face and confront what is being said, and I believe that's what we just saw here when she looks down, as what's being discussed is that she had been taken into custody at a specific point. Again, a lot of this is, well, how am I going to be viewed to the people that I'm connected with within the community? And you're going to see a lot of that within this case if you've really looked in this case, that she has all these associates, all these people that seem to have really liked her. She's known as this author, this really great mother that would not abandon her kids, not a flight risk. She can't afford to be a flight risk. Things like that really can make her look better in the eyes of a community. And then you have this hearing where certain things are being brought up that don't actually make her look great.
Was the charges she was facing?
Yes, we expressed to her the seriousness of the charges and the possible results of those charges. As well, we impressed upon her the importance or the value of her testimony in this case as it related to the charges that she was facing, and that her testimony or any information that she may have was more important to us.
Did you stress to CL that the information you were asking her about needed to be credible and verifiable?
Yes, we told her at the beginning of our interview that any information that she may have, we would need to corroborate in order for it to be of value to us.
Now we're seeing, as the camera pans out, more indications of stress. She's rubbing her pants leg. She has labored breathing. She's tensed up. She has all of that lip compression and, again, chewing on her words, wanting to say something in her defense, but not being able to. Again, though, not grief. No indications of grief. Her husband's gone. Again, pretty interesting given one of her books is about grief. That has obviously been on her mind, but it's apparent that that's only in relation to her children, that she has perhaps seen her children grieving the loss of their father, and they didn't know it was her that did it. She has put this book out there for them, but it has also brought her profit. So while it looks like a great thing, while it looks like something she did for the sake of her kids that makes her a good mother, she has gained some profit off of this and some attention, some connections within the community. So I believe that may have been more of her motive to make that book in the first place, and that she is not grieving, that she doesn't know to grieve this or how to grieve this, hasn't grieved this. And so to make a book telling children how to grieve, again, is interesting to me because she's not grieving, she's not feeling that, she's not dealing with that. So how is she to tell children that? Now, of course, she might have grieved something in the past. Everybody has several people that they've lost in their lives, or pets or something like that. So it's possible she has experienced grief before, but given the way she's behaving now, she doesn't seem the kind of person that would have that ability to feel the amount of empathy you would need to be telling people how to deal with that kind of emotion.
Did CL cooperate with being interviewed?
Yes, she did.
Did CL know Eric Richens?
Yes, CL told us that during the time that she spent cleaning the Richens home, she got to know Eric, that she felt that he was a really good person, she liked him, and she was very saddened to hear that he had passed away.
Executing that warrant, did you make any observations consistent with CL's testimony that she felt bad about Eric Richens' death?
Yes. Inside the home, we identified a bedroom that belonged to CL. In the bedroom, there was a mirror above a desk. On the mirror were taped or affixed several inspirational quotes that seemed to relate to her recovery and her drug court program. Amongst all those inspirational quotes was a newspaper clipping of Eric Richens' obituary.
The defendant asking CL to get fentanyl, what did CL do?
CL told us that she reached out to an acquaintance of hers, acquaintance one, and requested that she introduce her to somebody that...
Notice how the rubbing on her pants legs, the labored breathing, all of that seems to have stopped. She's completely frozen, staring directly at these people talking and what they're saying. Again, keying in on certain words, but she's just frozen in this moment, laser focused on what's being said. And then at one point, she's looking down and she's scanning the desk, thinking, considering. There's nothing in front of her to look at except that desk, and that is what she's focusing on. I believe, again, that this is her not wanting to fully confront everything that's taken place with CL here, her associate, and now learning that CL is potentially grieving Eric's death might make her feel a bit ashamed, a bit. In my opinion, it's really about, again, how she looks to the community. And now you have someone who's grieving the death of someone that Corey here has taken the life of. And so it doesn't make her look good. That now attached to all of this is people are grieving. It has hurt other people that are still surviving, and that is an issue in the eyes of the community. Today I'm analyzing the body language of Hardy Wills Traxler. This interrogation footage comes from a channel called The Interrogation File, so let's get into it.
Dispute later about who said what or what was said, right? Because, you know, like I said, we're just here to gather the facts, right? Not really, not gonna try to mess with you or anything, okay? That's not our style. Fair enough?
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to read your rights, though, okay? Since you were brought in by the officers, all right?
All right.
Are you wanting to speak with me at this time?
A few things to note right off the bat is that his hands are clasped, which indicates a level of anxiety, although they are forward. This is also a bid for connection, a bit of rapport building, and we're going to see the significance of that here in a bit. But Hardy then hangs his head as the officers say, "We're not here to do anything to mess with you, to hurt you." Prior to this, Hardy had said that these officers treat him pretty well. They seem to be very friendly, very great officers. Rapport building. This wanting to establish innocence before anything has been stated about why he is even here. Now, he knows why he's here, the officers know why he's here, but he immediately establishes this innocence through his body language, through some verbiage there, as he tries to tell officers, there was only one victim, you guys are doing great, you're very friendly, you're treating me well, and the officers are establishing that rapport back to get him to open up and confess and tell why this happened, how this happened in the first place. He is in this interrogation room because his father has been unalived, and the interrogators just need to know more about why this took place.
Yeah. Okay. And one thing I'll tell you, if there's a particular question or something you don't want to answer, you never have to, okay? And like I say, we're not going to do anything of the crazy stuff you see on TV or anything like that, shine bright lights on you or do anything like that. We just want to talk. Okay?
Consider talk, kind of like the officers that you already dealt with said they're all being very kind to you. You know, we're just working on it. Continue that, okay?
So let me just do a little bit about this. Can you just tell me kind of, I don't know you, give me a little background. Are you from this area your whole life? And where?
I know you though. I mean, like, ever since I could, I think I might have been born here or in St. Peter. I don't know exactly which town.
Okay.
Now you see him veer away from his baseline, him touching his face. All of this is indications of stress, especially since the nasal tissue swells when we're feeling stress. This could indicate deception, and he's not confident and clear about his answer of even where he was born, which typically someone who has antisocial personality disorder may lie, pathologically lie about anything and everything, things that aren't even relevant to how guilty they might be about something. And that's what we might be seeing here, although I cannot personally diagnose him. That is just what this indicates here, as well as the manipulation that came prior to this, where he establishes this sort of innocence and goodness about him, painting himself as this good person, this friendly person, building some rapport with these interrogators despite not even directly being accused of anything right off the bat. So you see some forms of manipulation along with, though through his body language with him touching his face, which we don't typically do unless we're feeling stressed. Now, stress alone does not indicate deception. People are anxious in an interrogation room, and that is to be expected, but they might start off being anxious. And just a few indicators here and there do not necessarily mean that you're anxious and stressed because you are being deceptive. It has to come in a cluster and in a certain context of things, such as what we've seen in prior interrogations where the indications of stress came when blame was shifted on the suspect and not so much around anything else. So it tells the interrogators especially that their baseline is not someone who is stressed in this interrogation because of the interrogation itself, but because of what they're being accused of or what that means for them and the shame and guilt that they might feel.
A lot of traumatic events, so possibly, but as of late, my dad has been being weird, and just him.
I don't know, just gaming and all that stuff, giving me technology, and then I just decided to burn it and go on a cruise and drive, come back, and it just got weirder, just real weird, and I got scared. Sure, I got scared.
So you see lack of blink rate here. You also see him start to barrier. Now, his clasping of hands and his hands reached out could possibly have been a barrier prior to this, but most likely that is a bit for connection. That is typically what we do. Then he pulls in when it comes to discussion about his father, and that becomes a barrier, a protection and distance between himself and these interrogators. Some sort of guilt and shame he's feeling around this topic. And you see indications of stress. Now, interrogators will sometimes give someone a water because they're being nice. Most of the time, they're giving someone water because that is another indication of stress. When someone is fiddling with their water, grabs that water, it indicates possible deception, especially since our mouth will dry up when we're stressed, when we're telling a lie. So reaching for that water bottle in certain instances is very telling to some interrogators.
And
Okay. So your dad is that Bruce?
Yep.
Is that right? And it's Bruce Traxler?
Yep.
And you guys lived together?
Yep.
Bruce Allen?
Since I was in 9th grade, I decided to move over with my dad because he started coming to my games 8th or 9th grade.
Okay.
But yeah, it just got weird to the point where it was just I don't want to be around this anymore. And
sure. Yeah. How about your mom? What's her name?
It's also interesting he establishes a difficult past with his father and his father being bizarre, saying negative things about his father, which someone who is not guilty wouldn't need to do, would not need to paint the victim in a negative light. That, again, is not telling in itself that he is being deceptive or guilty of anything. Just that typically we don't do that. We wouldn't feel the need to do that if there's not guilt or shame around this particular person, in this case, his father. And a lot of indications of stress is he has some adapters. He fidgets a little bit, but mostly he has adapters and barriering. He's protective. Now, sometimes interrogators will offer up this justification. Well, you had a traumatic, difficult past, so it would make sense that something would get out of hand and this might happen. Interrogators might offer up this justification, but in this instance, Hardy is throwing that out there right off the bat. I had this difficult, traumatic past, and my dad is bizarre. And this paints himself as a victim and paints his dad as the bad person.
when I was younger, she tried killing me and my brother.
Your mom did?
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened?
4th grade.
Oh, that's a tough deal.
Yeah.
All right. So you lived with mom up until 9th grade, though?
No, my aunt and uncle.
Okay. And who are they?
Pat and Kate.
Pat and who? Where do they live at?
Center. Live on the country, right? I think so, yeah. And that's the one that owns the construction company or runs it now, right? Okay, sure.
Well, let's do this. Can you just tell us about, you said it's got weird. I just want to hear a little bit more about that or try to understand that. Can we just go, today's Sunday, okay? Can we just go back the last couple of days, kind of what's been going on and start from there and go through the timeline?
I don't know. He's just been getting on me about going into the shower room and taking showers and the weird stuff. Then I don't know. It's just shower room, let alone the bathroom, and
He continues to paint himself as this victim of his father, and his father being perhaps a bit tyrannical here. He was oppressive in some manner. So Hardy is now saying, things got weird. I was just innocently trying to shower. But he has now distanced himself. Whereas they started this interrogation, leaned forward, happily telling the officers that they are good people and that he's basically a good person. He starts to barrier and then draw back. And that is typically what we do when we're feeling vulnerable, when we're feeling as if we no longer want to build rapport, connect with someone, that maybe he even wants to leave this room. And of course, most suspects do. And you're seeing a lot of stress, some adapters there, as well as he rubs on his arm a bit. Just a lot of indicators of stress when it comes to talking about his parents and this particular situation.
Recently, I've just been seeing like secure network on our internet. He's connecting to it or whatever, and I don't know who that is or whatever, but it's kind of, I don't know. And I just asked him about it, and he got all weird, and it's, I don't know. It's like he was possessed or something.
Okay. So you and your dad live together, just the two of you? Yeah. And nobody else lives with you?
No.
I also want to note that there are a lot of confirmation glances here. When he keeps saying, and it's just weird, he keeps looking up at the interrogators to make sure they agree they're on the same page, to see if he needs to switch up this narrative, but that they're on the same page, that they're agreeing, that they're responding in a way that means they believe him to some degree.
Oh, and you don't have any kids or anything of your own or anything? Not that you know of any, right? Okay. Anywhere? Okay. Do you have a girlfriend at all? Currently? Okay. So you guys been living out there? Are you working anywhere? Over in Belle Plaine. Okay. And what do you do there?
I just run the scale house. Trucks come in, I write out tickets for them, and okay. How long you been there? Just
You see what confidence in him looks like when it comes to being asked about his job. His head goes up. He's no longer protective and defensive and distancing and burying there. Instead, he's saying, oh, this is what I do, looking directly at the interrogators, and his blink rate's normal. In other instances prior to this, however, he was looking down, he was fidgeting. All of these are indicators of guilt, of course. Potential deception, as he is not making any eye contact at all. He seems to want to distract himself from what's being said because he doesn't want to say it, and he knows he should not be talking about this. Something happened there. So you're seeing a lot of that when he's looking down. Now, looking down in itself is not an indication of deception. Again, in itself, it has to come with clusters, and that with the fidgeting and the fact that he offers asymmetrical body language at one point. He's not making clear eye contact. Those all indicate deception. Now, if someone's looking up that way or down, they're data collecting, they're thinking about, they're recalling information, something along those lines. By him just looking down, not establishing any eye contact, except for specific confirmation glances, also indicate that he is trying to control this narrative, which he would not need to do if he was not guilty of something.
I don't know exactly, but sometime this summer. Okay. So you've been on unemployment for a while? Yep. Okay. And is that like a layoff then, or just because it's the time of the year? Is that time of the year? Yeah, it's slow. It's very slow, for sure. Okay. So like, you talked about some stuff your dad's been getting on you about. What has he been getting on you about? I mean, it sounds like you guys have a relationship like this, right? Got some friction?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? I won't put words in your mouth, but is that fair? All right. So
he exudes a lack of confidence in a lot of this. He's not wanting to just tell the interrogators what is taking place. What has taken place is he offers a lot of shrugging, a lot of I don't knows, this body language of defeat, him slumped over, him looking down, this level of shame, and just a huge lack of confidence in what he's telling interrogators.
I just don't know about it. Like, just kind of like, it's one of those things where possibly it's always been going on or not. I don't know though. I just don't know because.
Okay. And then, so something happened last night.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that? What happened?
We were just talking about life, and I asked him about, his friends, and I talked to him about my friends, and we just he just kept on looking at me. He wouldn't go to bed. He was just staring at me. So I started staring at him, and I'm like, and he started, getting weird. So I was giving him shit back, like,
attempting to look a bit incredulous, a bit in disbelief, making the situation seem bizarre and weird, portraying his father as someone who was this complete foreign person to him, this complete alien to him, at the point that things got intense, that things ended very poorly, and that he is the victim, that he just asked his father a question innocently, and he doesn't know really why his father did what he did, but it forced his hand. And he is definitely the victim here, establishing innocence before the interrogators even have to. In some instances, interrogators will offer up, again, justifications. They'll try to tell the suspect that they are a good person, but Hardy here is doing all of that for them, so they just have to continue this friendly conversation and asking the right questions by analyzing how he's moving and what he's doing here and what might catch them off guard. Now, you don't see his hands, they're under the table. He's possibly fidgeting. He probably does have some stress. He has a lot of discomfort. You saw him grab his legs. There's this adapter there, the self-soothing behavior. He's really uncomfortable. And that, again, that doesn't alone indicate deception, because you see his shirt sweat. Maybe he's uncomfortable because something happened prior to this interrogation that's making him uncomfortable, and not necessarily the fact that he's in this interrogation or what the interrogation's about. But you do see those adapters that do indicate something going on. That, along with the confirmation glances and his head down, he's in that defensive stance there, hiding this vulnerable part of his body, which we would typically do when we're feeling vulnerable. This withdrawing from the interrogators, this distancing, and him offering up a bunch of unconfident responses. I don't knows, maybes, it just got weird. Very vague, very general, and not confident, consistent responses.
So, you know, like, don't do it. Try coming at me. If I'm going to stay here, I want to make sure I'm safe. I want to make sure that I'm safe. And I don't know why. I think, you know, Don Callisto. I don't even think it's him, but my dad's always up there. But I don't think
the audio is also a bit off track here with his movements, and that makes things a bit difficult. But from what I can tell now that Don Clifto is being brought up, he's naming Don Clifto, and he's saying, oh, if I have to stay here, the stop gesture there, this defensiveness, him rubbing his nose, an indication of stress, him pulling back physically, all of this indicating now he's feeling defensive and guilty about something. That doesn't necessarily mean he is guilty of the crime he's being accused of, but guilt and defense about something.
I think it's him. You know, like, but I did what I did, and then, you know, I just decided to burn it, get out of there, and just move on with my life, because
that's gross. Like, my whole life, and like him, you know, like, out of all people. And our family has money, and I just felt like it was, I don't think our family thinks.
Distancing language around the actual crime. I just did what I did. People who are innocent will offer up exactly what took place. They will even use the extreme words, but his reluctance to do this is pretty telling that he's guilty. Now, at this point in the interrogation, everyone knows he is guilty. He knows that they know he's guilty, so he's not having to establish innocence, though he's still trying to. He's still trying to save, to a degree, his sentencing, and he knows whatever he tells his interrogators will determine how severe his sentencing is. And he's also distancing himself from this situation physically because he is feeling a level of guilt. Perhaps no real remorse. You're not seeing grief muscles. You're not seeing sobbing or anger or any kind of passion towards this. Just defensiveness, offering up his own innocence and saying that basically he had to do this, especially if he wanted to get along in his life and get away from this particular situation with his dad, who was being weird, who was perhaps being oppressive, putting more security on the Wi-Fi, on the internet. All of these things paint this negative character of his father and makes him seem like the victim.
You know, I don't think our family was doing it for money or anything, but I don't know. I just kind of, when I did it, I said that. I'll be honest, I could sucks. Well, my family, I love everybody, you know, like, I love you, and I've never even met you guys, and
well, no, a little bit I heard about your background. You're not a bad person.
No, I'm not. You know, I'm a very good person, Christian, Catholic. I think there's just some stuff going on at home between you and Dad that was...
There are certain personality disorders that will have such black and white thinking. There's good people, there's bad people, religious people, not religious people, and the religious people are the bad people. At least they know society might think so. And the good people are the religious people in his mind. So he offers yes, I'm good, I'm religious, and you see those hands come back. He's back to establishing rapport, saying he even loves the interrogators, though he's never met them. This could indicate a level of insanity, which perhaps is what he is trying to play up here, or it could just be him building rapport, him saying, I'm a good guy, you're good guys, my father is not a good guy, and making sure everyone is clear which category everyone in a situation fits in. And there are some personality disorders that will do this. People with borderline personality disorder will have this black and white thinking. They'll establish good and bad, and there's no in between, there's no gray area. There's a spectrum of that. Not all people with borderline personality will do that, and I'm not saying he has borderline personality disorder because I can't diagnose him, and I don't see any other indicators here that he may or may not. Just this one thing with those black and white thinking. And that's what we're seeing with him establishing the good and the bad people. These interrogators are good. He's good. He's religious. He loves them. His father's bad. His father's weird. Put more security on the internet. Acting bizarre. Possibly possessed. Anti-religious. Very bad.
Causing some conflict, right? Or it seems that way. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. What was the layout of the building out there? Did you guys each have your own bedroom?
No.
Okay.
And he liked it that way.
Oh, really? Okay. So what was the layout kind of? Was there one bedroom?
It was like just one room, one big room. And to the point where, you know, I went and got like a shade thing just to put on his care. And, when he'd lay down, he'd just look at me all the time. And then last night he tried to get me to take some sleeping pills.
Okay.
And then I was just like, I'm getting the f*** out of here or whatever. And I just sat there.
His fixating on and complete lack of blink rate when he's telling the interrogators this indicates him needing control over the situation, and him licking his lips very briefly when he's talking about this layout of this room, and continuing to play on the oppressive part of his life where allegedly there was this one big room and his father would just stare at him. He had no privacy, no safety, and his father was a bad man and acting weird. And again, all of this led him to and forced his hand to do what he ultimately ended up doing, which he will not name because that brings guilt on himself, and that would make him look bad in his mind. That is not socially accepted the way that in his mind Christianity and Catholicism is.
Talking, trying to catch up on life, and then he was like, I gotta give it to you or whatever, and then I'm not scared of you, blah, blah, blah.
That's what he was saying?
Yeah. And I had a knife in my hand just in case because I was scared. And all the Xbox gaming and stuff that he put in front of me because I wasn't, you know.
Now he's offered up a bit of inconsistency here where he says he had this weapon and there's this eyebrow flash around just in case. He wants to emphasize the importance that this was all entirely in defense, and he offers up that his father allegedly tried to give him a sleeping pill, give him something that he potentially did not need, and that his father says, I'm not scared of you, which is an inconsistency because it switches the role of him needing to be defended and protected from his father as opposed to his father needing some sort of defense, being defensive and protective of himself. So he has switched those roles verbally while with his body language trying to continue telling the interrogators, just in case, I had this knife and this guy was just crazy, and emphasizing that with his head and his behaviors, this report building as his hands are clasped in front of him towards the interrogator, that bid for connection there to try to get the interrogators on his side and let them know he's not just this wild, aggressive, rage-filled person that's bad. He's a good person. And on their side, all of them are just good people. And there's this outsider, his father, who is not.
He wanted me to stay there so I'd game and stuff.
So after that, what happened then?
I ended up, me and him got in a fight. He hit my shoulder and
Okay. Do you remember where you?
A bunch of different times, and then right in the heart. And once I did that, it was weird. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. Okay, my body.
Brief muscles, significance to what he's saying. He looks down briefly, which veers away from his baseline. Something's going on there as he continues to establish rapport and make this seem like a bizarre situation. But he has finally said an extreme word that he stabbed his father, which is not something that I would expect, but there's no other emotion around this. No grief, no indications of trauma or anger telling these events that indicate that this was an issue of defense, of protection. He's not crying. Normally, if someone ended the life of their parent and they cared about their parent, even if their parent was a bad person, if Hardy was actually of good character, he would naturally feel remorseful. If he had a conscience, says that there's perhaps damage to his amygdala and his prefrontal cortex that could come from trauma, from something else, but you're not seeing any other emotions around this retelling of events. He does, interestingly, say an extreme word.
Just felt whatever was in my heart just kind of went away or something. Yeah.
Okay. So when you guys were fighting, what part of the room was that happening in? Do you remember?
By the couch.
Or the couch?
Yeah. And then it just escalated.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You know, I love him more than anything, and it sucks. Like, I never wanted it to be like that. He's a great person. I'm a great person, and I've always loved him, and I've always been there for him, but when you get, you know...
You're not me like that.
So after you stab,
now you see him start to at least pretend to cry. And my belief is that these are not real tears because he's not sniffling. It's very brief. It changes at a specific time. He's trying to control his narrative, manipulate these interrogators as he has been throughout this entire interrogation. And he looks at these interrogators, which typically, if we are feeling raw emotions, we'll feel vulnerable. We'll withdraw socially and not stare at interrogators or have those confirmation glances to make sure the interrogators are reacting in a way that we can continue this narrative. That is manipulative, but verbally he's saying, I love my father, he's a great man. Everything he said prior to that tells us he doesn't really feel this way.
Did he go unconscious at some point?
Yeah.
So he wasn't talking or saying anything anymore? Oh, because it's gone. All right. And then what happened?
And then I just burned the place, grabbed my pillow and put it on the stove and got out of there.
Okay. That's how you started the fire, was with a pillow on the stove? Did you use any accelerant, any gas, or anything like that at all?
Well, I just know that there was other stuff in the room that might have taken like some flammable type.
Also, typically, a crime committed in defense as a need of protection would not result in someone further committing even more crimes, such as burning a place down to perhaps hide evidence. Because once the person is gone, which Hardy has indicated his father was gone at that point, and he has that physical barrier there with that one hand, as he's no longer trying to build a report in this particular instance, he's just telling the situation. He very confidently says, and then I burned it and left. Normally, if we're feeling as if we need to defend ourselves, once the person is gone, we no longer need to then cover up our tracks or do anything further to make sure that the person is no longer a threat.
Materials or something like that. So when you say the stove, do you mean like a wood burning stove or like the oven? The oven, is it like a gas oven then? Or
and in that place, you know, there's some weird shit in there. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like weird things happen.
Okay.
Weird things happen. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like,
can you give an example? I mean, no judgment from us. We're not going to think you're weird or anything for telling it.
So now suddenly he's having to data collect up here, or at least he's pretending to. He's not looking at the interrogators. He distanced himself and he has those adapters. All of this indicates that he is being deceptive about weird things happening, trying to play up and control this narrative that things just got weird, he had no choice. I also want to note here that there's a lot of interesting verbiage that points to him being underdeveloped intellectually, that he is childlike, and again, that points to some damage to his prefrontal cortex, some underdevelopments there. Issue with him being able to feel empathy and do things the way that other people normally would at his age.
I know weird stuff does happen, just we're interested, right?
I felt like I was eating other people or something like that. Like, he was feeding me shit. Like, he was feeding me some weird shit, and I didn't know what it was. It could have been his semen. It could have been some other shit. I don't know, but he'd always want me to eat his food and like weird shit like that. And you hear
his body language becomes very awkward, veering way away from his baseline here as he now again attempts to look incredulous with a widened eye, but he's looking half down, his chin's down, defensive, protecting himself, feeling vulnerable, which he should not be given the threat is not there. You're not seeing the emotions we should be seeing, the grief muscles, the tears, the anger, anything that you would see had this actually taken place, though his point might be to come off as insane so that interrogators believe he's he's insane, as he offers up this idea that his father was feeding him people and weird things. He keeps saying the word weird because weird is categorized as bad socially, and that's why he wants to make sure that interrogators know weird, bad, and place those all into the same category. And even though he briefly said that his father was a great person, now he's offering up, well, he was feeding me these things and giving me these things that were weird, maybe even people, or I don't know what it was. Though, had it been any of those things that he is listing, he definitely would have known. But you see all these indicators of deception and stress here because he isn't telling the truth here. I'm going to say allegedly, but all these indications with these adapters, with him protecting this vulnerable part of himself, his blink rate going up, him having to suddenly look up to recollect, whereas earlier it was down, and you're not seeing the specific emotions we're supposed to be seeing here.
You'd hear just souls and stuff in those rooms. Whenever you go out there, you're gonna, And whenever I did that, it was because he did that, and then I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember what time all this started at all? It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so you were fighting at 4 o'clock in the morning? That's when you were...
Me and him were talking all that night, and like... Well, he said something about my friends going missing, that he did it, and... just my family or whatever. I'm just like...
And did that comment that he made, did that make sense to you?
Now he's offering up a new story that his father has allegedly threatened the lives of, or taken the lives of, his friends, and that this was now no longer a defense thing in protection of himself. He's a good guy that was upset about his friends and his father threatening his friends, or perhaps that he considered his father a threat to himself because his father was a threat to his friends. He mentions 4 a.m., he mentions the sleeping pills. That all starts to come together as perhaps Hardy here had gone into some sort of psychosis, had delusions, and started hearing things. And this is possibly an attempt to play on insanity, to receive an insanity plea. So he's thrown all of these things out there, and someone who is actually insane would not be as controlled about it, as capable of manipulating interrogators in the manner that Hardy here is. And again, you're not seeing all of the remorse and grief and anger and things that we should be seeing in this particular instance. And it offers that this is not a defense thing, and that his tyrannical father was talking to him as counterproductive to the rest of his narrative, because it offers that they were actually having a good relationship. Things were not weird until a certain point, 4 a.m., and suddenly the switch flipped and things were weird. That mixed with the story of his father needing to say that he wasn't afraid of his son, Hardy saying he had this knife just in case, even though they were just talking. All of this starts to add up as to what really took place, and most likely not a defense crime, and him adding to it and very confidently and consistently stating that he then set the place on fire, whereas there are gaps in other parts of the story. It got weird, and he's not able to confidently give answers, leaving gaps in this story that someone who is innocent, that definitely needed to protect themselves, would not have.